Chapter 475 Before the Storm. You guys need to vote and comment, else I will smite you down. On P4 Tray 0N, a double chapter is available. Also, I started publishing my other work, The Villainous Returns, with a system, on P4 Tray 0N for the plus $10 tier. 9th of Rain's Hand, April, 4E200. 4 days ago, 10 ships departed from Strozmkai heading northeast in the Abyssinian Sea. After days of fast sailing, the fleet from Strozmkai arrived near Heusbane Peninsula. John was painstakingly meditating in his cabin while maintaining a peaceful mind. His thoughts were affecting the magicka around him, forming a strange swirl of arcane energy entering his energy points and circulating through his energy channels. He felt like he was finally breaking through the early Flame Dragon Heart stage to the intermediate Flame Dragon Heart stage. Many months have passed for this to happen, and the thing that moved him forward was taking a glimpse of the true powers of the dragon Naphthalargus. Cyrus' Book of Circles didn't part him the past couple of days, and also the ebony blade and a training sword. Whenever he takes an interest in a certain sword technique from the book, he copies it with the ebony blade, until he grasps its rhyme, then put on effort with the training sword to grind on it. It wasn't the right way to practice from the Book of Circles, as in that book, it was said that the practitioner must start by building his own forge and forging his own blade. John clearly wasn't that hellbent on forging, so he skipped to the sword swinging. His training was very basic and didn't use big move, so staying in the cabin or on the deck was sufficient. Actually, the book gave him a great insight on how to fight on the back of a ship, so all the situations were win for him. While he was meditating, he was expanding his mind. It is the range where his aura attacks can reach the forte of the Bloodskull blade. John found a method on how to focus the energy of the sword to reach higher distances without using any visible aura. This training widened his perception by many folds, allowing him to see outside the ship without opening his eyes. Outside the ship, the biggest city in Heusbane, Abba's Landing, came into view with some big lines of smoke ascending to the sky. Karim was giving orders to send a couple of boats in the bay leading to the city, but as soon as they approached closer, the nearby fort opened fire at them. Luckily, Miranda was at a possible distance where she can intercept such projectiles with her arrows. The boats turned around and hurriedly returned to the ship. Karim tried to send as many messages as he could to the governor of Heusbane, but what he received by the end of the day was a message of threats and insults, suspecting the whole fleet to be that of necromancers, denying all the possibility of Strozmkai being able enough to rebel the necromancers on their own. I don't think they need any saving. Karim lamented the missed opportunity of an alliance. Unlike you, the ruler of that piece of land should have an annoying vizier affecting his every decision, Isha said. You mean Governor Samir? He has a council of them. Unlike us, the poor islanders of Strozmkai, Heusbane is the wealthiest city in the south with their council of merchants and their army of mercenaries. If you want my honest opinion, I even envy the magnitude of the Thieves' Guild in their city. Anyway, let's not worry about the wealthy people, Karim said, and ordered his fleet to keep sailing north. Inside the ship, John seemed to have detected something before anyone else. He opened his eyes, stood up and put on his armor. He added some simple tweaks to the ebony mail, lately to look more like a mage's armor. He added a robe tail to the plate as well as a hood. They mixed well with the appearance, making him look more like a mage than a warrior. With his mask, Krylon, on and his staff, Pride, elongated to reach his height, John looked completely different save for his height that stood out. He opened the door of his cabin, and as he stepped out, something became stuck to his leg. Hey! Don't leave me! Sigh! He managed to ignore her for a day, but she was as annoying as ever. What do you want, Beth? I told you about the dream. Everyone else is paying attention except you, she said with an angry face. It is not important. he said, and walked away with her clinging to his leg like a monkey. How can you of all people say that? She demanded an answer. You know that my visions are important. Even our enemies had me killed to prevent me from seeing things. John ignored her and kept going until he reached the deck. I'll tell you why. John finally decided to speak. He carried her off from her nape like a kitten and placed her beside him. What I study and teach is mysticism, the most obscure school of magic. I consider it to be the one and only school, and every other school takes from it. It is the origin of spellcasting. Mysticism deals with 6 archetypes, 6 aspects of pure wonder. Someone like you or my wife are natural-born mystics who can divine beyond the realm of possibilities, but do you know how it works? John asked. Beth felt like being scolded, but she answered. By the inborn power and the assistance of the higher spirits, she said. Wrong answer. If you were my student, I would have tied you from your feet and dipped you in the sea right now. The 6 archetypes of mysticism are as follows. The outer energies known as magica, the inner energies known as soul, the outer realms known as the space, the inner realms known as time. Gaining information through space, which is called detection, gaining information through time, which is called divination. Magica and soul, space and time, detection and divination. Magica, space and detection are the material archetype. Soul, time and divination are the immaterial archetype. When you divine, you use your soul to gain information by looking through time. Seeing the past is something that matters, but seeing the future is something that doesn't matter. The future is something that may happen and may not happen, you only predict, not see. To what John said, Beth looked as if she was hit by something heavy on her head. You are saying that my visions don't matter. She was speaking on the verge of tears. John removed his mask, showing a warm smile. No. If you were paying attention, you will understand that I said to look in the past, not the future. The future gives you questions and makes you worry, the past gives you answers and makes you content. He said as he patted her head. She wasn't happy with what he said, but his words just now weren't just something he came up with to look cool. These words carried the bitter experience of a man who thought he knows the future too well and got his expectations betrayed many times. Nevertheless, he decided to play along. So, you saw 3 swords, a spear and a ship with red sails? He asked. There was another thing about, she was about to continue, but he stopped her. Let's focus on the first part for now, John said. The spear is Isha's, that's what we know so far. The 3 swords and the ship with red sails should mean something. The ebony blade and the soul sword are 2 swords. Can there be a third? She asked. Good thinking. Assuming that there is a third sword makes the picture come together. What else? The ship. He complimented her. It was like a ghost ship looming with death, its sails were red with blood, she said. A ghost ship? I wonder. John said and looked forward, then covered his face with his mask. What is that supposed to mean? She asked. Look ahead. John pointed his staff forward. Beth followed John's signal, but she couldn't see anything except the sea in 3 directions and the mainland in 1 direction. As she was about to ask, the atmosphere turned chilly all of a sudden. Mist and fog started emerging, blocking the view in all directions. The crew of the ships started to get quiet and take note of anything that may lurk in the mist. Kareem ran past John to the forefront of the ship and put his hand on the hilt of the soul sword to use its holy aura. His gaze pierced through the mist, and all of a sudden, his face turned pale from shock. Battle stations! Protect the hull! He shouted, calling for the men and running back to protection. Master Krylin, there is. I know. John seemed comfortable with the situation. What shall we do? Kareem asked. I'll secure the defenses of the 10 ships, then deal with the mist. Until then, you keep yourselves alive. John said while evoking a spell on his left and manipulating the magicka with the staff. Fair enough. John left Nefertiti with Beth and signaled his team to get to work. Miranda was on the crow's nest, Mirren was watching from the side, and Isha was checking the water. In the water, corpses started to appear, then wooden blanks that ships get built with. There was a wreckage nearby, but it seemed to be dangerous to approach. John teleported between the 10 ships, putting a warding rune on each one and activating it. It was then when it happened. Qua. Ka. The corpses in the water started moving in feral forms and moved to the ships by directing the wooden blanks they were floating on. Protect the ships, Karim shouting, drawing his radiant sword. The dead crawled up the hull and tried to overtake the defenders, but as soon as they made contact with the ship, they started burning. Those who could withstand the defense of John's wards were repelled easily by the spears and the harpoons of the sailors. Unlike how it looked like, it was not a hard fight at all. John made sure that nothing escaped his perception as he kept the ships safe from any surprise that might happen. After a few minutes, the ships started to speed, getting rid of all the ambush-drowned zombies. John returned to the flagship and Karim approached him. "Did you see what I saw?" Karim asked. "Yes. Now go to the front and raise your sword high, make sure to radiate a little bit," John said. "Why? The figurehead's place is in the front of the ship, it's common knowledge," John said with a smirk. "Heh. Not funny." Karim decided to do as John said. He stood at the forefront and raised the soul sword up, calling out its aura to radiate. "Perfect!" John watched as Karim started to be the center of attention. From the back, he started casting a large spell. In sync with Karim's action, John's spell took a few seconds to be evoked and cast as fast as he could. The spell was not easy, and as it was done, it took some time to take effect. Karim felt like an idiot for trusting John, but in the next second, that wasn't the case at all. From the sky above all the fog and mist, rays of golden light descended on the surface. It was as if Aetherius itself has corresponded to Karim's action. The spell's name was Light of Aetherius, and it brought the sunshine back to the pale sky of the soul snare. The mist dissipated as snow to fire, and what appeared beyond it was the wreckage ship carrying the flag of the forebear Republic of Rihad. Karim's face stiffened. Now that he confirmed what he saw in the fog, he realized that the plan he agreed with John on faced a big problem. Rihad is the farthest city to Hagath, the place where Zayn should be. If Rihad has already fallen, then the situation is more dire than any would think. PayPal for gift. PayPal. me/Eldokmizi. Chapter 476, Breaking the Siege. Sorry for the past couple of days. Things got a bit exhausting on my end as I am preparing for my postgraduate course for the master's degree. Also, a double chapter. Part 1. Master Krylin. What do you think? Karim asked. There are life signals, John replied. Survivors. Necromancers. The wrecked ship belonged to Rihad, and it was a war galley. Such a behemoth won't be sent out for trade but only for combat or escort. John locked on the living signals, then shot out a terrifying black spell. That spell was dark magic imbued with the energies drawn from oblivion. That unholy energy struck the ship in front of them. Some screams were heard before the wreckage crumbles. What caused the necromancers hiding in the ship to scream and wail was not the power of the spell but rather the effect. The weaponized energy of oblivion can cause serious harms like blindness, nasty paralysis, and the list goes on. The spell was called Daedric Nova. John made pride grab those necromancers up as he pulled them closer to the ship and put them under the effect of the spell, Bind. The power of that mysterious master was displayed again in front of the Red Guards, and he gained their utmost respect. With the help of Lust, hidden under his hand, John questioned the necromancers and knew that they were sent after the governor of Rihad, who escaped once the siege started. So Lady Farah couldn't hold her position. Humph, that's what you get from the forebears. Karim spoke in disdain, but he soon reflected upon what he said when he realized that the ones he talked about were other Redguards in distress. From what was said afterward, that governor lady was killed, and they waited here for someone from the cult to pick them once the siege is over. Other information indicated that the worm cell attacking Rahad is strong and led by a woman named Delilah. Isha showed a reaction hearing the name of Delilah once again a week after knowing the truth. As it seemed, the woman that plotted her brother's demise is a few miles away north. John. She spoke. I know. He replied, not caring that his name was heard by Karim or not. He twisted his hand, and the necks of those necromancers were twisted by telekinesis. He then turned their corpses to ash along with the other zombies in the water. We are hastening our speed, John spoke. Agreed. Karim nodded. Pick the wind, we have 2 nights to reach Rahad. Let's make it 1. As Karim rallied his sailors, John patted Isha's back and spoke. We'll leave her for you, but let's act according to plan. Keep a straight head, he said. I know, she said and walked away. John left her and was about to return to his business, but he was intercepted by Beth. That ship, it is not the same from my vision, she said. It would be a lame vision if that's all what it has to offer, John replied. He was about to leave her and walk away, but she spoke. I understand now what you meant, she said. About the past and future. You said that seeing the future wouldn't matter, unlike seeing the past, she said. I didn't say that, John said. I know. You said that seeing the future leaves questions, but seeing the past gives answers. She corrected herself. Indeed, John agreed this time. What you meant is that no matter what future we see, it is not valid until we know what it is from seeing the past, she concluded. John smiled and nodded. Good answer. So the ship, the swords, and the second part of the vision. I must look in the past. Good luck. Not too long after, Rahad was seen across the horizon. The city was burning and many people took on the boats to escape into the sea. Such a thing. John frowned. The worm cult was attacking with all its might in Rahad, just like Strozmkai, and completely unlike Hugh Spain. There was a strategic meaning for that. Strozmkai is the gate to Somerset and Rahad is the gate to Cyrodiil. Controlling them means controlling the southern borders. Prepare to land. We will strike them down. Karim gave the orders and the warriors were being lined on the deck. John came beside him to act his court mage and stood in line. As the fleet of Strozmkai got closer to Rahad, they could see what kind of monstrosity did the worm cult create this time. They saw a number of giant centipedes made of bone as climbing the city wall and clinging to it. Then the zombies and other undead used these centipedes as a ladder. The scene was straight out of a horror movie as the defenders on the walls Rahad were putting their all against the final assault of the undead. After their governor abandoned them, things must have kept going south. What will you do? John asked Karim. The walls, we need to secure them, then force the undead to retreat somehow, but wait, what is that over there? Karim noticed something and pointed a little bit to the east. Well, I'll be damned. John couldn't help but exclaim. Behind the undead army, a new player came to the rescue of Rahad, and that was none other than the Empire. Black battle standards of carrying a red dragon and 7 swords declaring the identity of the 7th Imperial Legion marching beyond its borders deep into Hammerfell. Those bastards! Karim didn't like the sight of the Imperials. Don't worry about them. I'm not sure about Rahad, but your presence and actions shall determine the political outcome if you play your cards right, John said. You have an idea, Master Krylon? I do. I can teleport you and your elite squad to the wall right now. Isha will accompany you just in case. The armor I have you has the function to draw energy out of other artifacts. If you couple that with the my soul sword, you will move like a radiant war machine. You game? Karim nodded. He then started calling for names and gathered 20 of his special guards. Isha joined them and John cast a large teleportation array taking them in a blink of light to the central post on the wall. Miranda, you two know what to do. Search and destroy. It is somehow my favorite game right now. Mirren murmured. Let's go, Miranda said, and the two teleported to the battlefield covertly. Nefertiti, look for that woman called Delilah. Nefertiti acted reluctantly like a teenager, but John ignored her. What about me? Beth ran to him. John thought for a while, then called Jax out of the cube. Look after Jax. Make sure he doesn't do anything stupid, John said. Jax and Beth were confused, thinking that John was confused, but rather he confused them on purpose, saying confusing stuff. Meanwhile, John arrived at the forefront of the ship that was charging to the shore. He could see the 7th Imperial Legion marching and attacking the cultists from behind. Buzz. Star. The Imperial war trumpet sounded across the horizon, marking the arrival of the Imperial aid. Not sure if the Red Guards of Rahad asked for aid, this meant that a huge stone was being thrown into John's plans. But competing against me in music is a no-no, John said, snapping his fingers. With the length of the sides of the ship he is on, 2 lines of large war drums made of green transparent magicka appeared. Let's hear it. With his command, the bardic knowledge power was activated, and he chose something from his memories. Drum, drum, drum. All allies in range receive 20% less fatigue. And the heaven shock with the sound of his spectral drums. The strong sound startled all the fronts, but as soon as it sounded, Kareem and his men were beginning their assault on the wall. He did as John told him by activating the armor's enchantment with the soul sword, and stole all the limelight from the Imperial battalion that just arrived. Very well. As the ship touched the shore, the enemies were finally in the range of John's magic. He aimed his staff forward and maximized the output of his magicka, shooting out a stream of lightning towards the first giant bone centipedes clinging on the city wall. The lightning obliterated it and bounced off to the other. The blasting power of John's raw magic kept sweeping through the wall, destroying every bone centipede on the eastern wall in mere seconds. Followed his destruction was the cheers of 1,000 fresh warriors willing to jump off the ships and take down every last necromancer with their swords. Their wishes were fulfilled in less than a minute later, as they were finally safe to land. They got down, formed lines, and secured the beach outside Rahad. To his lordship! Destroy those dead walkers! The formation of soldiers moved smoothly thanks to the commanding officers and the military discipline of the warband. John moved on his own, spearheading the undead, as if he is walking into a park. He cast Paladin's Cloak, Holy Ward, and conjured a number of winged twilights around himself. He also was moving around while casting spells like Sun Ray and Ashen Flame. By his eyes, he focused his attention on a band of necromancers staying not too far in the back or in the fray. John's movements were swift and reached them in with the intention to kill every last one of them except one. Perhaps too used to death lurking around them, they didn't notice it sneak at them. Once John got closer, his movements became strange and they felt something. Shit! Who is that? They saw a shadow of a man coming at them, but in just a second it disappeared. Where did it go? The necromancers were confused, looking around, and lost focus on the 2 sides of the battle against the incoming legion and Rahad. But by the next second they felt something fall down. Looking back to where that shadow appeared first, they saw one of their ranks that talked just now was cut 2 clean vertical halves. Swoosh! A presence was felt from the other side. Looking towards it, they saw another one of their ranks look with daze at himself, checking if he is fine. It didn't feel like anything wrong with him, so he looked up with a relieved face, but in the next second, he felt nothing. The second necromancer fell on the ground, being cut in 4/4 X shape. Retreat! Ass! The one who was just speaking got his point of view altered, then darkened. The others saw his head fly like a leaf and land quietly on the ground. No matter what, this was the most 3 terrifying deaths those necromancers ever saw. They didn't speak afterward, knowing that if they did, they'll attract the killer's attention. They exchanged a few looks with their eyes, and as elites in their field, they knew exactly what to do. In a split of a second, they all turned around, firing corpse explosion at every undead in their vicinity. They scanned the place carefully afterward and found no traces of any assassin. Still, a slight killing intent was felt, and they realized where they messed up. They were standing in a circle, all aiming their staves and weapons outward. Currently, there is only one place the assassin might be in. One idea came to mind, and one idea scared the living ghosts out of their flesh vessels. Don't look back. That was the idea. Part 2. Do not move, do not breathe, do not look back. These were the thoughts that this particular worm cell thought of. They have already offended the assassin by moving all at once, and he didn't kill them yet. One wrong move, and that face with a dreadful smile behind them will send them to damnation. Only an idiot would try to, yes. There was such an idiot among them. Get the fuck off. A worm knight carried a big maid, turned around, and moved his weapon up only to freeze in his place. Swoosh. By the next second, all the legs were cut. They fell on the ground screaming and writhing from pain as they became a bunch of crippled criminals. John walked from their midst and looked at his handiwork. Hiding the aura, now that's a terrifying art. An aura is the energization of presence. Hiding the aura meant not using it, but in the case of this technique, it meant thinning its shape to the finest possible. The aura/technique, which can be used to launch a ribbon of energy for some meters ahead, now turned much sharper and unimaginably hidden. The teachings of the Book of Circles and Cyrus' commentaries on it were the reason how John reached such finesse in his swordplay. Delilah, guide me to her, you get to live. John spoke directly to the minds of the crippled cultists. They felt fear, but they were still rational despite their state. One of them took out a dagger and stabbed himself. To the Worm King. John watched the cultist kill himself and remembered how crazy can those guys be. Okay. John waved an ebony blade a few times and cut the arms of the remaining necromancers. They screamed, shouted, and prayed for the Worm King to smite them down and claim their souls. No legs, no arms. I presume that death is a good option indeed. Now, where is Delilah? John had to use a lust to gain information about the enemies again, and this time, he was pointed to the edge of the battlefield. Over there, a team of Imperial legionnaires was advancing in an organized formation, taking ground and leaving the bombardment for the Imperial battle mages. On the other side, the necromancers were holding their ground well under the command of Red Guardwoman carrying a saber and casting magic. It was Delilah. Seeing John walking towards them, both the Imperials and the cultists felt threatened by him. Get rid of that! An Imperial officer ordered 3 of the battle mages to handle the walking battle mage in full ebony. Now, known for their ferocious style, the Imperial battle mages excelled in both long and close-ranged combat. In a second, the 3 female battle mages teleported around John from 3 directions and attacked him with their stave. Not sure when or how, the 3 were beaten in the most merciless way possible. One received a punch right in the face, the other was blasted by John's imagination, and the last one in front of John found herself on the ground under his feet as he stepped over her. John raised his staff and aimed it at the necromancers. A raw blast of fire erupted, taking down half of the worm cell. In the name of Prince Karim, ruler of Strozmkai, I, the court wizard of Strozmkai, hereby arrest you. Show resistance and you'll regret it, John said. The atmosphere froze all of a sudden. John's spell just now was strong enough to obliterate a city wall. Did the governor of Strozmkai really have such an individual under him? We, 7th Imperial Legion, announce that the worm cultist known as Delilah is under our arrest. The Imperial officer stood forward and aimed his sword to the woman at the core of the necromancer's formation. How dare you talk? Imperial Legion, you said? Fine, you scum are under arrest as well. John aimed his staff towards the Imperials. Speechless, the Imperials and the necromancers understood that the mage is strong, but to arrest a work cell and an Imperial team all by himself in one go, there were limits on how far can one be unreasonable. John even raised a hand and sent a signal to the sky. A few seconds later, over 200 Redguards on horsebacks came and circled the Imperials and the necromancers. On the battlefield, the hunting chargers were unstoppable, dividing themselves under 5 teams of 200 each. One team was there just to support John, and the other 4 were sweeping through the battlefield, killing the undead and the necromancers. On the other hand, the slow 7th Imperial Legion had less than 1,000 mostly infinities with diverse roles and a team of cavalry on standby. Once the team of cavalry supporting John circled the Imperial arrest team and main worm cell, 2 movements happened on the battlefield. The Imperial cavalry team moved towards John, and in response, Karim and Isha joined the nearest team and headed towards John too. The Imperials arrived first. At the forefront of the Imperial cavalry, a woman in full ebony Legion armor jumped off her horse and walked alone with absolute confidence between the hunting chargers, then headed towards John. John let pride float on its own while aiming at the necromancers, then advanced to the woman. She looked left and right at the tense situation that will spark in a 3-way slaughter in just 1 second. Then she saw the destruction caused by John's spell, as well as the 3 battlemages trampled by John. Lastly, she turned to the Imperial officer in charge of the arrest team. "Well done," she said. Seeing his pissed-off commander, the officer felt like a mountain is falling on his head. Finally, she looked at John. "And you are?" she asked. "None of your business," John replied, then added, "The third. He is the court wizard of Strozmkai," the officer said. "Far from your home, islander," she said without lifting her eyes off John. "Say that again, Imperial," John replied. In truth, the woman was terrifyingly strong. She would make her legion shiver in fear if her mood turned dire, and quite frankly, they weren't worried about John with that woman around. Still, John had an equal presence to that woman, and he wasn't even putting effort. By that time, Karim and Isha arrived. John could notice the woman Delilah getting a pale face and hiding herself behind her followers. It was all useless, as Nefertiti was in her shadow. Karim jumped off his horse and walked beside John. John intentionally stepped backward to give him the limelight. Supported by the soul sword and his mystical armor, Karim withstood the Imperial woman's aura and looked majestic in front of her. "Imperial scum, you are trespassing," he spoke. "And I assume you are the governor of Strozmkai," she spoke. "And you are." The woman took off her helm and showed her face. She looked like a regular middle-aged Imperial with black hair and normal appearance. Nothing was too impressive about her looks, despite her powers being the real deal. "General Cassia, commander of the 7th Imperial Legion under His Imperial Majesty, Titus Meade II," she said. "Karim, son of Ghazi, governor of Strozmkai. Why are you trespassing the borders?" An imperial decree came out ordering the 7th Legion to secure the borders with Hammerfell due to the recent undead crisis, interfere in defending the innocents, save lives, and investigate the worm cult. Imperial lies. Karim seemed not to be accepting what the general said. He was right. The Imperial would only act this generous in a forebear's territory just to suck up for the Redguards and find an excuse to return to Hammerfell. "I think the crowns should focus on themselves. Why are you out of your territory, Governor Karim? Did you take your army and abandon your people?" she asked. "Nonsense. It is by the blessing of Hunding that he sent us the sword of Ader and blessed us with our court wizard, so we emerge victorious over evil," Karim said. His proud manner of speech was that of a crown, the most traditional faction in Hammerfell. Impossible! It wasn't General Cassia who exclaimed, but rather someone from the ranks of the necromancers. Everyone looked at whoever spoke, and the situation turned chaotic in a split of a second once that person made eye contact with Isha. Delilah! Isha shouted and charged towards the woman she swore to cut to shreds. Isha, careful! John called. Anchorite, run! The necromancers ran to stand in between Isha and Delilah to give Delilah time to retreat. Fuck off! Isha thrust the spear of bitter mercy at those unfortunate enough to think they could withstand her. All those who were in the way got their bodies torn to shreds by her aura and weapon. Delilah cast corpse explosion on the dying necromancer to stop her from getting closer. Every necromancer in her cell jumped at Isha to stop her and get their bodies to explode at point blank once they die. Boethiah! Isha shouted and called forth her blessing of Boethiah. A storm of elements surged up from her surroundings and blasted away anything that stood between her and Delilah. Shit! Delilah didn't hesitate and summoned one of the premium undead from the ghost world, a worm zombie horse. You won't get away! Isha stomped the ground with the bottom of her spear to conjure a storm Atronach horse. And the chase started. Both the Atronach horse and the zombie horse had endless stamina and insane speed. Delilah blasted her way through the chargers and the legionnaires abandoning her worm cell and riding towards the mountain range up north. Chase! Arrest Delilah! General Cassia ordered her legionaries. You are not going anywhere! Karim wanted to stop the legion, but John stopped him. Karim understood and changed the order. Support Isha, he said and ran to his horse. General Cassia tried to stop Karim, but John stood up to her. Everyone else moved save for those two. John and General Cassia. Move, she said. I'm sorry, but you are under arrest, John replied. I'm an Imperial General. Still under arrest. You sure? Under arrest. He. General Cassia drew her sword. It was an ebony gladius that she didn't carry anything other than it. The ebony imperial gear was a monopoly in the Empire for the generals and the high officers. According to law, only select individuals can put such a gear. John also was in full ebony, which provoked General Cassia a lot. His attitude was infuriating and his power seemed bottomless. Hiya! She charged at John at an unimaginable speed. He only had his staff in his hand and his sword on his back. Once she aimed for his neck. He slightly moved to the side, then held the ebony blade, descending on the general with it. She felt a great threat and her instincts made dodge. By the following instant, the ebony blade was cutting the ground where she stood. Not wasting any time, Cassia jumped at John with a shoulder attack, pushing him away before he could retrieve his sword. Seeing him barely retreated a step, she continued with another shoulder attack, then another. John was too large for her to easily push, but she found this method the only one working. But she didn't know what manner of sadistic smile John had as he let her push him. You are strong, but not fast, he said and moved his arm in speed. She couldn't intercept punching General Cassia as she tried to push him with no means to dodge. The punch landed on her face and struck her down to the ground. John sealed the dead by kicking the woman away like a soccer ball. Giving up, woman? He asked. Cassia struggled up and spat out a mouthful of blood. I underestimated you, mage, she said. You shouldn't have. Hiya! This time she attacked him with more discipline, keeping to her style and not risking a move. John found her to be a tough shell to crack. He tried to retaliate, but he managed to reach a stalemate with her. The two didn't want to go all out. If he killed General, the Empire won't sit still, and if she killed a crown, Hammerfell won't let it pass. In the end, John decided to break her leg by kicking a knee when she is focusing her weight on it. Once the opportunity came, he did what he aimed at, but General Cassia was a careful opponent. She used her free leg to center herself on John's kick and used his force to launch herself in the air, aiming a kick under his mask. Her kick landed, she landed, the mask flew. She turned to stab John in the shoulder, but faster than she could ever be, John held her sword by the blade and his mask from flying away. Pride was hovering above Cassia with lightning spell prepare if she thought about moving. John's face appeared to Cassia. He had a light beard because he didn't shave while traveling, and his hair was cut shorter to appear like a handsome young man. Of course he didn't charm Cassia by his looks, rather, she recognized this face very well. Can Knight Brother Johnrad? PayPal for gift. PayPal. me/Eldokmezi. Chapter 477 General Cassia. First, thanks to Adhiruk Barua for his support. Second, I added all the Discord gallery pics on Instagram at @Don_Dokmezi. Let's abuse this novel to have tons of followers. Can Knight Brother Johnrad? The situation was awkward to the point of cringing. John hated many things, and being confused with his old man was one of those things. Wash your mouth, woman, he retorted. God gave me a handsome face as he gave people wind and rain. It is not my fault that bastard was carrying an umbrella. Hearing John's reply, General Cassia realized she was completely wrong. John let go of her sword and they two took a step away from one another. You are not Johnrad, you can't be. Johnhild? She said. John frowned once this woman uttered his birth name. She looked like someone in a complete daze as she held her head from the surprise. Johnhild, what on earth are you doing here? She said. Do I know you, woman? He asked. You don't? They never told you about someone called Cassia before? She asked. John kept a safe distance as he tried to remember the name, but nothing came to mind, so he shook his head. To that, she sighed with a disheartened face. No wonder. Once Tyr became on the wanted list and I got promoted, there have been a few chances to reach one another. She said. Wait, what does this have to do with Uncle Tyr? He asked. Long time ago, your father and uncle served as blades. I knew them from the academy. After the Great War, your parents headed to Hammerfell, and I followed the injured Tyr to Skyrim. We got married and, at least we used to be, she said while pulling out a string with a ring tied around her neck. John could recognize the ring. It was indeed a pair to the same one Tyr carries around his neck. John felt like not knowing what to say in this sort of situation. Okay, no hard feelings, right? Ha! None at all. What kind of situation is that? John wondered. To run into Tyr's ex-wife here of all places, this is by no means a merry encounter. What are you doing here? Aren't you on the run and supposedly hiding in Cyrodiil? She asked. Is that what the crippled Imperial Intelligence Agency has on me? He asked. She thought and nodded. I am hired by the governor of Strozmkai, while the one that appears in Cyrodiil is an actor I pay for to keep the spies busy chasing ghosts, he said. You can't be serious. She was taken aback but then narrowed her eyes. Why tell me? Obviously, the Penitus Oculatus won't believe you. I assume your divorce with Uncle Tyr had to do with you being a general and him being a wanted man. They will think you are defending your ex's relative, and put you in a bad situation, he said. She blinked a few times, seeing that he didn't miss a thing. But the more important reason was that I needed some time to distract you while locating my companions, and also to finish the teleportation spell. Wah! It was nice to see you, Auntie. Let's meet again. Ciao. And John disappeared from his place. General Cassia kept looking around and almost face-bombed, but she let out a long breath in the end. Those red-headed giants can't just stay put. Away from where Cassia is, John appeared on a mountain road. The area was north to Rahad and John had a good view of the battlefield. No matter how he looks at it, he was enthralled by the majestic moves of the cavalry on the battlefield. Compared to this kind of combat, modern warfare is bland and senseless. No wonder the denizens of this world were very easygoing with the idea of war. John never liked war. That's why he put all his resources into one of two options: grow beyond the strength of the enemy or avoid conflict altogether. That is, of course, from a ruler perspective. John as a person is by no means a pacifist. He just didn't like open conflicts where death roams senseless. It was the normal mentality of someone who grew up knowing the horrors of war from modern times. It was said that on Earth before World War I, people had the same old view of war as this world. To them, it was the field of glory and chivalrous deeds. People even celebrated the department of the soldiers. However, World War I marked the end of such beliefs, and everything changed with the announcement of World War II. For those who once celebrated cried tears of bitter dread. Thus he never thought of changing his view to fit his second life. He didn't study the art of war and left that for others, fully understanding his aptitude for disasters. Now the negative thoughts had to fly away because it is about bloody time. John finally heard the galloping horses coming closer. He stood in the middle of the mountain road and waited for the arrival of Delilah. On the opposite side, Delilah came riding her zombie horse in an exceeding speed, while putting all kinds of magic traps behind her to hinder Isha. Damn it! How did it turn like that? Why is she here? Delilah was infuriated by the fact that the carefully devised plan she came up with is now facing mortal danger. Isha has returned with the spear of bitter mercy in hand. Everything is on the brink of falling apart if the worm cult isn't aware. If Isha is here, then the labor of Azura is not far behind. The worm cult knows that he is a mercenary called Krylin who originated from Skyrim. Many suspects on the list of being Krylin and countless assassins were sent to bring the heads of those suspects, but the real Krylin keeps popping up out of nowhere. For example, in front of her right now. License and registration, please. She couldn't even understand what kind of being appeared on the road in her way. She felt an unfathomable amount of power coming from that person and senselessly avoided contact with him, leading her zombie horse off the road to the edge of the cliff. She was thrown completely off balance, facing the ground and falling to her demise, but in a second, a large hand appeared mysteriously, grappled her from the fall and pulled her up. That may be the worst way to pull over I have seen in my days. Thankfully, no public or private property in that direction, but it still will cost you a fine. Once she regained her senses, she found herself being held by a ridiculously large hand made of ebony. The owner of the hand seemed to be the one caused her to fall from the road. What are you? Road patrol, ma'am. You were stopped for excessive speeding. She was stupefied by the unreasonable answer. Wait, you are that mage? Maybe due to darkness and him being in all black, Delilah recognized John a bit later than expected. Yes, but currently I'm on road duty. Anyway, it's nice to finally see you, Delilah. Heard a lot of awful shit about you. Corpse dealing, necromancy, first-class murder. I mean, the excessive speeding will be the least of your worries. Delilah was done with John's rambling and finally showed resistance. From her mouth, she spat a dart towards the eye gap of the mask. John simply moved his head, and the dart was deflected by the forehead metal. Bad Delilah, John said, and tightened the grip of Ozidal's Titan first on her. Crack, 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 crack. Arg. Just like dry bread crumbling, John caused Delilah's bones to experience agony. Former battle lord or not, getting that amount of bones broken is a no-return point for anyone. John threw her on the ground and removed greed from his gauntlets. He then came beside her, held her head, and stuffed his hand in her mouth. At that time, Isha managed to catch up and jumped off the Atronak horse with her face twisted like the devil. "Leave her to me," she shouted at John. Okay. Just let me take out those razors hidden in her mouth. Damn, there are darts, razors, a poison pill, tiny stuff. Wow. Look at that larynx, now that's something that can handle a deep throat. TSK TSK TSK, I always had a good impression of girls who can give a deep throat. Hey, move aside. Isha stormed towards John and pulled him off Delilah. If someone is hiding something in their fucking maws, do this. She picked a small stone from the ground and stuffed it in Delilah's mouth. Punch, punch, punch. 3 consecutive hook punches to Delilah's face with a stone in her mouth caused a weird sound to come out, alongside all blood, teeth, and basically everything. And here I thought I was the bad cop. John shook his head and turned around to block the road, as it seemed that the Chargers and the Imperials have finally caught up. License and registration, please. Tyr and Cassia image was added. An hour after the chase to the mountains, the situation stabilized inside the walls of Rahad, and most of the necromancers were hunted down. Those who escaped were the elite necromancers that were difficult to deal with. Still, the city was saved. According to the Worm Cult's plan, Strozmkai, Rahad, Dragonstar, and Elenhir were essential to control before anything else to block any outside assistance. After all, they were Hammerfell gates to Somerset, Cyrodiil, High Rock, and Skyrim respectively. 2 of the 4 states resisted the undead invasions successfully. Elenhir fell with little to no resistance, and Dragonstar is enduring the siege. This was a massive rock in their plans, but the cult still hasn't played all the big cards. In Rahad, John descended the mountain following Isha, and behind them were the 2 teams of the Redguard Chargers and the Imperial Legionnaires. Down there, General Cassia and the rest of the 2 factions were gathered in a tense atmosphere. Karim wasn't pleased that John locked the mountain road, but he had an understanding of the latter's power, and the things he should and shouldn't complain about, so he wasn't planning on making trouble. Once John and Isha appeared in front of the 2 factions, General Cassia took the chance to speak first. Where is Delilah? John stood far and Isha walked by, not answering, or rather ignoring anything said to her. Once she crossed by General Cassia, she handed the general a severed head. So you don't say we didn't leave you some face. Cassia held on to the head and looked at Isha, who had a relaxed smile on her face. We needed her for interrogation, Cassia said in a scolding manner. Isha walked away and tossed the knife she borrowed from Mirren back to him. She wouldn't have said anything in the first place. Also, we already know everything. John spoke and continued, that was just to satisfy your curiosity, General. We are not obligated to answer any of your questions. Karim became pleased with the way John spoke to the Imperials and decided to nod with a smile. You know everything? This is the worm cult we're dealing with. Do you have any idea how far their roots extend, Joe? Please, refrain from using my name for the sake of politics, John said. Then what do you know? She persisted. As he said before, we are not obligated to answer your questions, Imperial. Turn back to your Emperor and tell him that Hammerfell doesn't need his help. If you stay, we will be forced to remove you by force. Karim stepped in. General Cassia was depending on using her acquaintance with John to smoothen the talk with Karim, but a Crown Redguard prince and a Nordic Thane are nothing if not the most stubborn people in the world. She felt stressed by the current situation. A few days ago, some forebear nobles escaped into Cyrodiil and sought out asylum to the Imperial Legion, claiming that Hammerfell has fallen to the undead. They also carried a message from their leader asking help from the Imperials. The situation sparked the interest of the Emperor once all the contacts in Hammerfell were cut and a soul snare network was confirmed to be up. By the long animosity between the Empire and the Worm Cult, it was a good chance to take them down once they are out in the open and the 7th Imperial Legion was mobilized. There was also an order that was passed under the table for General Cassia, and that was to get the full support of the forebears, which is a good chance to return to Hammerfell after 25 years of its independence. But now, with a crown prince being the first thing they run into, this expedition was bound to fail. Still, a war hero like General Cassia was much more experienced than John and Karim combined when it comes to war. So, you two will gather the men, Rally the soldiers and call for holy war? She asked. I like the term. Hey, we can use that for recruitment. Holy war against the evil cult in the name of whatever god you guys agree on. John said. That's indeed a nice idea. Make way for Redguard's people to rise against the undead. Kareem played along. My point is, which direction will your campaign take? She asked. John paused to understand what she was throwing to, but Kareem could see what she is aiming for. From Rahad, there are 2 ways in Hammerfell, northwest and northeast. You want us to take one, so you take the other? He asked. You can't fight on 2 fronts even if you have him on your side. General Cassia replied, pointing at John. The worm cult needs to be dealt with before they achieve whatever they after. Reincarnation of the Worm King, John said. The way he revealed the aim of the cult for her made her go pale. What? It can't be true. I told you, we already know everything. But, Menamarco, this is bad. You seriously need our help then? She insisted. Then it's by our terms. We can't risk fighting 2 snakes in one hole. Kareem said, You Imperials take the northeastern front. Impossible. The northwest is too large for your warband to cover. Cassia felt that her plan backfired. We are chargers. The north is a rocky area where we can't charge, and as you said, we have him. Kareem said. The negotiations continued for an hour between Kareem and John on one side and General Cassia on another. She wasn't happy to be forced to take the narrow road north, but if she made a bad connection with the first Redguard lord she runs into, things would be extremely hard later on. In the end, she agreed to Kareem's terms. Kareem told John that he can't trust the Imperials for many good reasons. The Empire's politics is vast, and even if General Cassia was sincere about uprooting the cult, the Imperial politicians will come later to collect a debt he is, by no means, going to pay. John agreed with him due to his prior experience with the Imperial politicians. By that, the temporary alliance was formed. Cassia left John with a word that if the 2 fronts went well, they should be meeting again at the gates of Sentinel, capital of Hammerfell. Following the negotiations, Kareem marched in Rahad leading the hunting chargers and announcing the end of the cult's siege. He met the dervishes of Rahad and the remaining nobles by the end of the day and formed an alliance that will march to the northwest after gaining 2,000 men from Rahad. It was called the Alliance of Hunding, taking Prince Kareem as its leader. Hunding is the deity of perseverance and make way. His known avatars are Frandar Hunding, Diagna, Ebenarm, Prince Ader and Cyrus. I was not sure what make way means, but reading in USB about Hunding and arriving at an ESO book called The Manifesto of Make Way, I think it is a less controversial way of adding the concept of jihad in the Redguard culture, judging by the fact that they are based on Arabs and Moors. John watched everything conclude from the sides while fading in the background as the court wizard of Stros Mkai. Beside him, his group was sharpening their knives for the big fight about to arrive. Miran, don't use that knife from now on, he said. Why? Isha used it to torture that Dalila woman. And it went everywhere. Everywhere. Yes, brother, everywhere. Places where the sun don't shine. Chapter 478, A Task from Boethiah. The alliance of Hunding was a change for the better in Hammerfell, a martial alliance between the local forebears and crowns as well as the independent factions. The goal of getting rid of the Walking Dead unified the factions that were in dispute for years and led them northeast. Prince Kareem was titled the leader of the alliance, and his court wizard Krylin dominated the position of the High Mage of the alliance despite the fierce competition from the recently joined mages. It was safe to say that in front of John's destructive powers, even the master mages didn't want to cross spells with him. Still, John utilized both a greed and a lust to keep a low profile, granting him a mysterious background. On the 14th Oraine's hand, April, for E200, the Alliance swept and mopped the undead across the republics of Rahad and Teneth, crossing the rivers Tark and Urk, reaching halfway in the crown state of Gilane. There, the situation was much better than the Forebear Republic. In Gilane, the Alliance of Hunding has reached 7,000 in total and started to face serious opposition from some local lords regarding the policies. It was safe to say that John paid each lord a visit, making sure whether or not they were traitors that joined the worm cult or just fools who want to stuff politics in the time of great crisis. There were indeed some traitors among those lords, but John pointed them out in less than a few hours. After that, the whole front was united again, and no one dared to question the heroism of Prince Karim or his court wizard. Still, the only hurdle that made Karim grind his teeth was the governor of Hugh Spain. That governor was the same guy that rejected the help of Strozmkai and almost sank 2 of their boats, claiming that there is no way that a small island like Strozmkai can survive on its own. This governor appeared by the day of departure. He claimed that he is forming an alliance to rid Hammerfell from the undead, and he has reached out to his friends in the Empire, so the 7th Imperial Legion will arrive to assist him. That moment, John himself jumped off his seat, took off his mask for the first time in public after applying lust to change his appearance into a Redguard. Then, he started beating the governor of Strozmkai and stripped him naked from his fancy clothes and threw him across the camp. The aides of the governor of Hugh Spain wanted to defend their lord, but still faced the same fate under the heavy hands of the infuriated John. "That's fucking it. I don't give a fuck anymore. Stop fucking up with my fucking plans, you fucking fucktards," he fucking shouted. The political state in Hammerfell was as weird as in High Rock and the Empire combined. The land was divided on the Lord of the Crowns and the Forebears. While the Crowns are narrow-minded and xenophobic, the Forebears are more flexible and friendly to foreigners. This may look like a plus to the Forebears, but many events showed how treacherous they can be when they switch side. The story of Hilda and Jonrad when they were betrayed by their allies in Hammerfell was an example of that. The Crowns mostly don't like foreigners, but not to a hostile degree. They are mostly just similar to the Nords and the High Elves. Those 2 factions existed ever since the Yukadons arrived in Hammerfell and had both good and evil in their ranks as anything else. Anyway, after the events of Gilane, Karim had a private meeting with John and his team to discuss how to proceed from now on. I must say I never expected a warband of 1,000 Hunding chargers to turn into an army of more than 7,000 Hunding soldiers. History will remember us, friends. Indeed? John nodded. For the good and for the bad. Let's not get ahead of ourselves then. Right now, the Lords of the Alliance expect me to come with a decision regarding the next direction. Hugh Spain is behind us, but we can rest assured that its governor has already cleared it from undead despite being the idiot he is. Now we have 2 directions, Haggard and Sentinel. Haggard is where most of the undead are and where the refugees come from. The city of Haggard has faced a great deal of destruction at the hands of the leader of the cult. I know we need to meet with the Imperials and the king at Sentinel, but we can strike Haggard at once and be done with it. If we choose to go to Sentinel, which is our second direction, we will waste a lot of time. For myself, I say we strike Haggard and be done with it, Karim said. Haste makes waste, Karim. We can't attack Haggard. Don't let those petty achievements you made get to your head. John responded. But we have a chance. To run in a clouded territory where the enemy is the strongest and their soul snare spell make them even stronger? In case you haven't noticed, the necromancers are getting stronger the more we head west. We can't risk the men marching behind us, Karim. John and Karim had opposite opinions, which was not the first time happening. However, Karim was smart enough to know that John's opinion is always based on many future calculations. So you are saying we should march in the desert? I didn't say that. I'm waiting for the midget to share her divination with us. John pointed at Beth. I have news, she said. Everyone looked at her, waiting what their seer found out. I'll start with the good news about the situation in the north. The Imperials have managed to free Elenhir and Dragonstar. They gathered a lot of local lords and were joined by some unexpected powerful allies from Skyrim, she said. Oh, and who might those be? Mirren asked. The Nordic companions, she replied. Ho ho, the boys are coming to play. Man, I never expected to hear of them this early. John became excited. Your friends? Isha asked. Not all of them, but they are cool. What else is there, Shorty? He asked. The bad news, it is regarding Hagoth and the Alakar Desert. We're listening. As the champion of Boethiah said, Hagoth is too dangerous. We may have faced many kinds of undead up until now, but the true power of the cult is focused on 2 points, one in the Alakar and the other in Hagoth, she said. And what of the citadel of Ebonarm? Shouldn't they control the Alakar? Karim asked. They were forced back. What? Isha jumped off her seat. Impossible! Even John exclaimed. The grim look on their faces was carrying a shocked meaning to it. The citadel is strong, much like the companions of Skyrim. No one can push back those battle-crazed maniacs with normal strength. They retreated to the main citadel near Sentinel and abandoned most of the mosques and halls across the desert, including the Ansei Pyramid in the Dead Sand region. The only reason that happened was the vessel of Manamarco. Zane has personally moved to eradicate the citadel. Those words left a ringing silence in the room. Zane himself pushed back the citadel. His powers seem to have grown considerably. Even John doesn't think he can push everyone in the citadel on his own. You've got to shitting me. Isha slapped the table and went out. She was frustrated by the fact that her brother was the one who did such a thing. Their master, his wife, the people of the citadel, these are all the family of Zane and Isha. Yet the foul cult and the Daedra simply use him to their gains just like that. It was infuriating. Mirren walked up and went after her. Please tell me that is the end of the bad news, John asked. Then I would be lying, Beth replied. John closed his eyes and took a breath. Well, do your worst. The cult is forming a new horde of undead in the Ansei Pyramid, instead of the one you destroyed in the ghost world. And Boethiah has a task for you, she said. John paused, looking at Beth closely. Boethiah? Why, I don't remember being her laborer. Even better, you are the champion. Sigh. What does your mistress want? John asked with an annoyed face. I saved the best for the last. Our agents have discovered the location of the cult of Clavicus Vile, and it is not far from here, she said. And? John didn't seem interested. Beth smiled and got closer to him. Every artifact, every treasure, every rare thing Zane has gathered for Clavicus Vile. It is all there. A vault filled with things a Daedric prince craved for is just there for the taking, and only the most accomplished thief from Riften who pulled the most ridiculous of heists can reach it. Those words said by that tiny girl made a large man like John tremble. It wasn't from any emotion other than excitement. For a very long time, he longed for nothing. He had no desire to steal anything, for he was already too rich to care, but now, Katatosker had a challenge. Prince Karim, I believe we are already in agreement about where to go next, John said. Indeed. Hagoth is a tough nut to crack, and the Citadel needs our help. Meeting our allies in the north and uniting the fronts is also good. I'll mobilize the forces. Karim understood the severity of the situation and started preparing. Even if they attacked Hagoth, being exposed to the Alakar desert from the back is sheer madness. Crossing the desert may be not wise, but what else can they do? On the other hand, John took Beth to the side and sat facing each other. Now tell me, little Beth, what will I be stealing? John said with a wide smile. Little Beth? I remember being called midget and shorty just a while ago, she said. And you have my sincere apology. Now tell me, I haven't stolen anything since the Ebony Blade in Whiterun, and that was ages ago," he said. Okay, don't be so excited. It is in a place on the road to Hagoth called Shady Grove." "Shady Grove? I see, it is not far on the map. Do you have more details?" "No, not that you need it. Go there and look for any presents for the cult of Clavicus Vile, infiltrate, steal, and come out. Simple, right?" No. I haven't stolen anything in ages. I must make it the most dramatic heist ever. What do you think? Which identity should I use?" "That's none of my business. Okay, I'll go there and empty the vaults? Is there any bonus quest or anything?" "No, or maybe there is. Get any dirt of Clavicus Vile while you are at it," she said. "Come on, dirt on a Daedric prince? I need a shovel to unearth the fucker. His last name is Vile, for heaven's sake. Well, how about this? He is a dog person." "Fair enough." Beth was patiently keeping up with John's excitement. "Okay. What is my reward?" John rubbed his hands while asking. "Whatever you steal is yours?" she said. "Come on. Boethiah can throw a thing or two, her good OL champion." How about a blessing?" she asked. "You mean like that blessing of Isha that can make everything go in a swirl?" "No, each Daedric prince has a few dozens of those blessings lying around. You'll get a suitable one." "Okay, I'm in. A blessing of Boethiah, that should be a good one." He looked up wondering what kind of blessing it is, but then he spotted Miranda sitting silently and reading from a book. "Hey Mara, you and your brother have a blessing of Mephala, right? What is it like?" he asked. Miranda froze in her place as if she remembered something extremely horrible. "Don't want to talk about it," she said and buried her face in the book. Why? Is something wrong?" He was just asking, but she teleported away. "Okay, what was that about?" John asked Beth. "You know, some things are just too sensitive to talk about, especially the blessing of Mephala those twins have," Beth said. "Is it that worthless?" John asked. "Actually the opposite. I've never heard of a blessing that ridiculous before. If I am correct, which is always the case, that blessing can make them as strong as you once you go all out," she said. "The hell? Those two can do something like that? Why didn't they do it before? We could have just solved almost anything." John was taken aback. "Well, you see, you know that thing you always tease Mirren about. The G. Language, girl." John flicked her forehead. A minor should say those words. "She's talking about the gay scene. Well, if they used that blessing of Mephala, that thing may come true in some way." She dropped the bomb on John. Heavy breathing. John couldn't help but exclaim. "After that heist, I'm going to have a few words with Mephala." Chapter 479, The Heist. Guys, I was thinking that once I finish assembling the new PC, I may start live streaming on DLive. Who would watch? Just an idea. Also, thanks for @CrazyApes being a patron. Since this whole seventh labor against the worm cult started, the one who went through tons upon tons of emotional roller coasters was none other than Isha. John felt a lot of responsibility towards her, but he also knew that he must push her forward and be supportive. To anyone in her situation, she was actually doing very well. That's why after finding out that Zane attacked the Citadel and going on a rampage, Isha was invited by John to deliver a painful payback to the Daedric prince Clavicus Vile. "We are going on a heist inside one of Clav's vaults, the one that holds everything Zane gathered for Clav." Feeling reckless and none caring, Isha decided to follow John in his quest, and thus the two departed from the Hunding Alliance camp that was moving towards the Alakar Desert to deliver vengeance upon the Daedra. Using every spell John knows for traveling, they crossed hundreds of miles in a mere hour to arrive at Shady Grove on the back of a Flamehawk Atronak, reinforced with the mysticism spell Acceleration and the alteration spell Zero Friction. Seeing Shady Grove from above as the sun was falling down, John frowned at the sight of the town. It was supposedly a town to the west of Gylane on the road to Hagod, but from the looks of it, the cultists seemed to have laid waste to it. "Look over there." Isha pointed at the town square. Those who couldn't flee to the east were captured by the worm cult, and their suffering was just beginning. Stories were heard of the atrocities done by the worm cult once they enter a town, but that was way worse than bandits and other vermin. The men were killed by the most barbaric of ways possible, which started from ripping them apart by the brute undead horses or slowly burning on tar-smeared crosses known as the human torches to impaling and skinning. The young children were separated in 2 spots being tested for their talent in magic. Those who had a sense to magicka were taken away by the cult to raise as necromancers, and those who didn't were taken to the fire pit. The females had it the worst. They were made to watch what happens to their men and children before being taken in turns by the lusty cultists, and in the end, they get their share of torture. What the fuck? What the fuck is that? Isha couldn't understand what sort of madness is this. Even the Daedric creatures would kill for the hunt and only torture when necessary. However, these creatures from the same race she is are way too barbaric. That is soul-squeezing, John said with a solemn face. Isha looked at him with a face that can't even understand what he meant. What the fuck is soul-squeezing? Answering that question required John to remember some unpleasant moments he went through. Soul-squeezing is an agonizing process only the lowest among the low perform it. You know of the ritual a sacrifice, when a mortal offers the soul of another mortal to a higher entity. Higher entities such Daedric lords or an evil chim like Mannimarco require black souls, souls of the mortal races. Tortured souls carry more power as they drain every strand of their energy within agony, so once they die, the energy outcome gets to be amplified. If a black soul gives you 5,000 magicka points, a squeezed soul can make over 8,000 magicka points up to 10,000. He said. John, people's souls, they aren't numbers. I know. For those of you who feel familiar with the term soul squeeze, is a perk in the enchanting tree in the game, and what inspired me for the idea. Soul squeezing is barbaric, but John knows it very well. He performed it on one of the enemies that hurt him the most, Alaric of the Forsworn. The method was passed down from Zykel to John, and it was the deal with Molagbal. Let's get our thing over with, John said and started preparing. Wait. Isha held him. Those people. What should we do about them? If we charged blindly, they will be used as hostages. We don't know what kind of enemy waiting for us down there, so let's play smart and slow. Whatever happens to those people, even if we caused collateral damage, just endure it. He said and passed her a bow. You're decent with archery, be my eye in the sky. Cast Muffle Rune on the arrows you will use to snipe, and Fire Rune on the arrows for bombardment. I'm going down, we'll be linked. John put on greed as a mantle and morphed into a Cagiate form with lust, all while jumping off the hawk Atronak. Once he landed, he rolled nimbly on a hidden place and stood up as Jonia, the curious ginger Cagiate. Looking left and right, he made sure he was unseen. What's my status? He asked. You are in the ruined area of the town. I see little presence and coverage from up here, so make sure to advance smoothly, Isha said. Roger. Despite sneaking, John was still in the ebony mail. Whether he liked it or not, this armor was designed for stealth purposes. It is completely silent, impossibly light, and incredibly sturdy. John could run as fast as he wants without attracting any attention. And so he did. Combining greed, perfect stealth, and the Shadow Stone, walk in shadow blessing, John was as good as a ghost. He ran as fast as he could, leaving behind no footprints, and jumped nimbly like a Cagiate, avoiding all obstacles, blowing the dust off his parkour skill. He jumped between buildings and walls, scouting every inch and laying down magic traps. One after another, John circled the town once and twice for recon. "This won't be hard," John said. "John, we have company." "HM? No one is around me." "On the other side of the town." "I wouldn't call that company, Isha. No, they are outsiders. Not cultists, I think. A bald Imperial and a Casiate, they are infiltrating like us, shit." "What?" "They are monitoring the situation from above like us. That Imperial has a pet owl and it is flying right below the Atronak." "Did it see you?" "Negative. Keep stealthy and fly higher. I don't think it can see me. Keep an eye on the guests, wouldn't want to hurt friendlies." "Understood." John didn't expect the party will have more clowns, but as a madman once said, the more the merrier. Cheese for everyone. John sent Nefertiti in the Shadow World to stalk the owl and analyze its connection with that Imperial, then returned to his action. John, in his Casiate form, lowered his tall body and walked on all four with his tail wiggling around. He imbued himself with greed and maximized its property, perfect stealth. Then let himself loose. With the flexibility of an animal, John moved on all four in an unimaginable speed. He reached the area where people were being tortured and passed swiftly like a feather between traffic. Each necromancer he came across was stunned with a paralysis spell. A second, 2, 3, 30, 40, a minute. All the necromancers in town were paralyzed without even realizing it. The people of the town were still wailing and screaming from the torture and pain. The situation looked as if the necromancers were just standing over them watching. Nothing changed. From above, Isha was holding her breath with wide eyes. She could see John because she was allowed to, and what she saw was a whole new aspect of John. That brute that liked to smash and bash showed some moves that can put both of Mirren and Miranda to shame. The name Catatosker wasn't just for show, it was well earned and fully deserved. Isolating the town is done. It seems that the town hall is the headquarters of the cult of Clavicus Vile. John conveyed, "What is your status?" Isha woke up from her daze and checked her situation. "It is clear from up here. Our Imperial and Casiate friends are avoiding the cultists carefully. It seems that the Imperial is some sort of a seer, a mystic perhaps." "Interesting. A fellow mystic is always a welcome addition," John said while casting Beacon Rune around the town. Beacon is a spell developed by Nurina and was lately developed by John into a rune version compatible with the system and the light screens. Once John connects the beacons to himself, he can get visual feedback on what's going on around the beacon rune. Not only was the town under his control, but he also could see and hear everything around. A few minutes after waiting in the shadows, the two guests entered the town stealthy and kept avoiding the cultists. The Casiate was very skilled at sneaking, while the Imperial kept following his companion's lead and detecting the magic for him. "This way, Kellen. That big building over there must be the place you want." "Are you certain, Nag?" "I have a strange feeling about this." "Don't worry, this one is certain the scroll will be there this time." The Imperial was called Kellen and the Casiate is Nag. Interesting pair, and their goal is quite obvious. The Elder Scroll that Zane acquired. But even though John is a generous man, he won't be this generous to let an Elder Scroll slip by. "Looks like we have to get rid of them after all, Isha," he said. "Should I do the honors?" "Patience. The thief can't kill on a heist." "Why?" "Because that's the first line between a thief and a bandit." John kept watching Kellen and Nag as they slipped through the town to reach the town hall and snuck through a window. It was his turn to follow. Having those two fools in front of him will make them a good decoy, but unlike them, he had his ways in. He simply walked towards the front door of the town hall, fully sure that all the cultists around were totally paralyzed. But beyond the gate, he felt too many concealed auras. It was time to work. John scanned the place, quickly avoiding all the strong auras underground, and realized that the upper floor was just a decoy, for there were numerous underground tunnels. Speaking of the worm cult, I guess the name is well earned, John joked as he cast Life Vision U and Death Vision U to gain precise feedback on his enemies' locations. Now it was time for the big guns. John found a place where the tunnels around him were empty and took out Pride. He cast a highly focused red beam that pierced the floor under his feet straight through the ground and cut it in a circle. He then used telekinesis to clear the entrance he made. Pride's roll was over, and now came the turn of Maroon's razor, a one-man, one-dagger action. John slid through to the underground tunnel that was dug by some unknown method. It seemed like a non-magical way because it lacked any trace of magicka, so it is safe to assume that some sort of undead was developed in a certain way to dig tunnels, just like those siege centipedes from the day of Rahad. John took the tunnels one by one, discovering a whole new town under the town. It was a large operations center for the cult to use. Thankfully, John was able to locate the ins and outs of the tunnel network. He waited until the Imperial and Cassia pair were in the tunnels too, then started sealing those entrances. Once all was over, he contacted Isha. I left you a way in from where I entered. Now you handle everything above the ground and leave underground to me. Understood. At that moment, none of the cultists could come to imagine that above ground they are trapped with the most spiteful and angry sister in the world, while underground they are trapped with a monster who wants to play a thief for the sake of not letting his skills rust. Every notion of terror was just reversed. From now on, we can begin the countdown. After this heist event, only 2 remain, a short side story and the final battle. Chapter 480, Down the Lich Hole. A note at the end of the chapter. Kellen and Nag. Their appearances gave off the vibe of common travelers who were on the road for months. After all, a few in this world were capable of utilizing magical methods to travels in insane speed, like a certain John Dare. Those 2 traveled across the continent, crossing mountains and rivers to track an item of absolute importance to Kellen, the Mystic Imperial. During their journey, they came across all sorts of oddities. The item they are after was an Elder Scroll. None knew much about those mysterious artifacts, but a few with a certain skill that allows them to look into the Elder Scrolls without being blinded. Those, of course, are the members of the ancestor Moth cult, the ones known as the Moth Priest. Kellen was a Moth Priest. His journey started ages ago when he left the Imperial City as a Moth acolyte not long after the Great War. Just like his colleagues, he was sent to investigate and retrieve any Elder Scroll from the ones that mysteriously disappeared from the Imperial Library prior to the Great War. So far, his mission was fruitfulish. Those who acquired the Elder Scrolls won't possibly just hand them back to the Moth Priest. That's why many priests had to find alternatives, and Kellen's alternative was Nag, a professional Khajiit explorer. Throughout the years, the pair managed to retrieve some Elder Scrolls, but life took its toll on the 2 partners, giving them the airs of vagrants. Thus it was hard to distinguish Kellen as a member of a very esteemed order form a bigger, or distinguish Nag as a professional explorer from a thief. As of late, the 2 were chasing an Elder Scroll that fell in the hands of a Nord Thane almost a year ago, but once they reached a place called Winterhold in the far snow wastes of Skyrim, they were chased away by the Thane's wife, whose eyes glowed as red as the moon masser. Later that year, an Elder Scroll was stolen from Wayrest and arrived someplace in Hammerfell in the hands of a Daedric cult. That's why the 2 were infiltrating this place with all chaos breaking loose above ground. Stupidity was it, or courage, Kellen's duty to gather the Elder Scrolls and Naga's addiction to risks and exploration led the 2 into one of the most dangerous places on Nirn yet. It is awfully peaceful. Nag couldn't help but comment about the situation. It is indeed. Something is not right. We should secure our retreat, Kellen said. This one agrees. The two turned back to see their escape route, but as they reached the place they entered from, the road was blocked by some rubble that appeared without any notice. Things were more serious than they could imagine. Meanwhile, in another place, John was consumed in playing the role of a thief on the easy settings. He wasn't discovered, as there was no chance someone with his resources and cheats can be discovered in the first place. Even the magic he was casting needed a very sober arch-wizard to trace a hint of it, so for now, all was good. But John made a discovery. All the cultists of Clavicus Vile in these tunnels were vampires. Underground, there were loads of human victims used as livestock for those vampires. They were blinded and brainwashed to act like herds of animals, which made John pour his anger on the first vampires he came across, ripping them apart with his bare hands. After cleaning behind himself, hiding the bodies in the cube, John decided to take a different approach to this situation. Out of mercy, he wanted to end the lives of those brainwashed people, but knowing that they would power the soul snare instead, John left them be. He rather targeted the vampires with a weapon they never faced before. One vampire was patrolling a tunnel, ran into John without noticing him, only to get himself pinned to the ground with John above him. John cut his own hand and let his blood flow in the mouth of that vampire. The vampire smirked out of feeling the power come back to him, but in the next instant, all control was lost. The vampire, which is a being with a grim soul, a body that feasts on blood, and eyes that can control its victims, is now under the control of the species that was always its prey. John's blood was special. It was higher than any blood, for it was refined by magicka and life energy, especially with John gaining the power of the eternal flesh that makes his body never age from the raw vigor it possesses. He then stood up and the vampire followed him like a meek servant. John checked his blood thrall to make sure it is under his full control. "How many dickheads in this den other than you?" "A few dozens of the Moroni clan of vampires. The worm cult stay above ground, but they guard the treasure room with us." "Nice. Where is the treasure room?" 2 levels underground. "What is guarding it?" 10 elder vampires, 3 flying skulls, some undead. "What on Nern is a flying skull?" John didn't remember anything of the sort. It didn't matter anyway, so he gave the vampire the last order. "Go bring me 2 of your vampire friends." With that, the vampire turned around and walked in the tunnel. John hid around a nearby corner, while displaying what the vampire is seeing on a system screen through the beacon rune. He left on him. A minute later, the vampire came with 2 others. "Hey, wait up! Who wants to see us?" One of the 2 vampires following the one John enthralled kept nagging. "He is here," the thrall vampire said. "Who?" "Him." "Who is that? What's his name?" "I don't know." "The fuck? No need to talk to him too much, he won't answer you anyway." John came out of the shadows. "Restrain that one." Without introductions, John leaped onto one of the vampires while the other one was restrained by the thrall vampire. It didn't take much for John to enthrall the other 2 after making sure that no sounds escape with a muffle circle. He lied around. Now, he had 3 thrall vampires on his side. "Okay, dickheads, bring me your friends." How many liters of blood did he spend on those vampires? The answer was, not much. John's blood is too potent for them, to the point where a few drops were enough to control a lesser vampire. Judging from what he knew, he now controls almost 8/10 of the vampires. It wasn't a big number, but can still overthrow the others. John couldn't risk facing the vampires and killing them in a direct combat, else, when Clavicus Vile claimed their souls, he would surely see that his treasury was compromised. And now for the grand finale, infighting between vampires, which is not anything strange in Daedric communities at all, but rather something highly encouraged. John's thrall vampires were unleashed like feral beasts on the higher vampires, and a senseless fight started. John was standing on the sidelines watching how it all unfolds, and even took the chance to trap some souls for the purpose of not leaking anything important to the Clavicus Vile. In less than 1 hour, all the tunnels were controlled by the thrall vampires. John gave them a final order to go to their coffins and sleep early like good little boys. Meanwhile, the Imperial Kellen and the Casiat Nag took notice of the situation. They have explored 3 levels underground till now and found them completely clean. At the final level, there were traces of battle but no bodies were found. This is wrong. This one says we should leave, Nag said while analyzing the place around him. Be my guest. Whoever locked us down here made sure we have no choice but to move forward, Kellen said. The situation only required advancing at the moment, but it wasn't long until the two finally came across someone. It was a Casiat, ginger-furred, tall, and completely donned in black. If that was not an evil cultist, then by no means he is anything else. The good thing is that he didn't notice them. The two understood that it would be best if they didn't attract the attention of that person and rather kept watching from the back. At least they could figure out the situation first. On the other hand, John didn't mind some audience and advanced forward until he reached a gate. It was a large gate sealed by some kinds of roots and have many dead signals behind it. This was without a doubt the treasure room. Even if the gate needs to be opened with some sort of a password or a sophisticated ritual, John has the master key to all lockable/unlockable things on Tamriel, the key that clicks, the skeleton key. Click. Knew it. The key was hidden under Begreed, so no one gets to find out about it, and was hidden back at the cube once again. With that, John pushed the gate open and walked in. Well, 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 what do we have here? John walked in the room in front of him, seeing mounds upon mounds of gold just lying around. There were weapons, accessories, books, gemstones, and a whole lot of things over here and there. This treasure room would out the wealthiest of merchants to shame, no matter how he looks at it. But John had an immunity to the glamorous gems and the shining coins. Little can attract a man like him with pockets as deep as his. Thus his eyes spotted the trick in the scenery right away. The chains of Ozidal's evil fists were loosened all of a sudden, then got imbued by John's magicka, and in the following second, they were on a white ashen flame that consumed even the ground touched by the flame. Crackle, crackle. John waved his arms with the chains on them, and they danced like snakes of flame around him. Swing, swing. He swung them at the same time against the largest mound of gold, and they melted the coins on touch, going through the mound and burning what was beneath them. Shwa. Whatever that was, it seemed to have let out its final scream. Come out, John called. John retreated the chains and waited for the other auras to move, and so they did. 3 flying skulls came out from behind the piles of gold. Impossible. He saw through us. Can't believe it. Can't be true. It is dangerous. We need to summon our best minions. Odd as it is, 3 flying skulls were hovering in the air in front of John. Those skulls had gemstones in their eye sockets and seemed as dead as undead. How rare! John exclaimed. Of all things I come across, these are demilichs. Demiliches are a deteriorated form of liches, the undead that attained the highest ranking among their kind, the lichdom. Those demilichs are liches that has fallen from grace and got their phylacteries destroyed, but survived thanks to prior preparation. Even though rare to come across, John witnessed 3 of them. Demilichs may have fallen from grace, but they are far from powerless. A demilich is very resistant to most weapons and magic, and if disturbed, the skull will levitate and suck the souls from nearby living creatures. He knows. He knows. He knows. The 3 exclaimed in surprise, questioning, and realization respectively. Of course I know. You fucks even feel familiar. Don't tell me you lot were the ones I fought in the ghost world. Weren't there 4 of you? You are. Don't tell me. The dragon priest. From what John said, the 3 demilichs remembered the event that led to their demise. These were the very same liches from the ghost world John fought before. The Lich Falcon and his lackeys. Let's see. The ancient Lich, that's you. 2 of your 3 goons, and the last one, the one I killed with my butt. Where is it? Shit. Keep silent. Quiet. The 3 floating skulls tensed up all of a sudden and looked awkward. Could it be that killing liches with my butt is an endgame for them? John asked. Well, it's a theory worth checking. John was about to take his weapons out, but as soon as he moved, one of the Demolics noticed his movements and opened its mouth, casting magic. The void around John distorted, and a being came forth, sending an incredibly heavy punch towards John. John entered the Gotfang stance, and with one palm, he stopped the attack. Then with his body, he channeled the power of the impact to his other hand that struck back that being at its abdomen. A perfect counter. The being flew away from John's side and landed on a pile of gold. It was then when John took a good look at the recently summoned undead surrounding him. You've got to be kidding me. Not just from one undead, but he recognized most of the ones that were summoned. These were the reanimated zombies of men he once knew. The former champion of Boethiah, Gollum, the 2 orcs laborers of Malakath and Periite, minotaurs and centaurs from the Battle of Forsworn John Dare, the worm cultists that he killed once he invaded the Ansei Pyramid, but most notably, the fighters from the Imperial Arena he killed by his hands, and on top of them, the one he just blew away, former Grand Champion Darius. The worm cult has collected all those bodies and brought them back for one last round against him. God damn you. Now I'm pissed. John stopped the ground, and a dragon roar came from inside his soul through the aura. He was going to rumble now that things have reached this point. His astral energy was called forth and manifested itself in the form of tens of fire WYRMS, spectral serpentine flame ghosts with dragon heads, swirling around him. No matter what gold in this treasury, this battle will soon melt it all to the ground. Thank you. First and foremost, I deeply apologize for the unannounced break that I took. It was important, and so I am sharing the news. It has been a long time, but I finally got the chance to buy a total badass PC for gaming. It took me the past few days to put it all together, and it is a dream come true, guys. But the most important thing to say here is that I would never have done this without your support. I would have never. This is the novel's money, and I will put all the efforts through it in the novel. We wrote almost 500 chapters on old laptops, smartphones and internet cafes, but this is yours as much as it is mine. I am happy, but I can't express how happy I am. Once again, sorry about the unannounced break, and to the chapter. Chapter 481: The Elephant in the Room. To John, this current situation felt like someone has gone through his backyard and dug out all the skeletons he was keeping. The only victims that are around were the ones that got too disfigured to bring back, like Alaric for example. Darius, Gollum, the 2 laborers, Malvis, and the list goes on. Ha! You should tremble in fear now, mortal. You should be scared. Yeah, scared. The 3 Demolics were excited to summon their glorious undead that caused the look on John's face to change. They bragged and dragged, thinking they have already got into John's head. God damn you. Now I'm pissed. You fuckers are over your motherfucking heads in ways you don't even comprehend. John spoke in a tone that betrayed his Casiate appearance. What I kill should stay dead. Not for some shits like you to reanimate it. Once he finished those words, his power exploded in a scene that can only be described as spectacular. Tens of fire WRMS appeared around him in a storm of draconian rage. None knew what caused him to be that angry, but sure as hell this treasure room was not going to stay intact if that man kept increasing the heat by the insane fire WRMS surrounding him. Some of the gold coins lying around the treasure room started melting from the intense heat, and all the weak undead were already burning. Do something. Attack. Attack. It is burning. The 3 Demolics feared the damage they were receiving. They were in the lowest form a Lich can reach in death. After that point is true and absolute. The damage that their damned souls will take will render them mindless skeleton once they get reanimated by the Worm King who they have disappointed too much. Now, they could only think of attacking John with all their power. The first undead capable enough to withstand the heat, Fire WRMS, charged at John with its sword aiming at John's head, but John didn't even spare that zombie a glance as a Fire WRM went through it, setting it ablaze then to a fine ash. John then took a step forward with his hair brightening redder and his eyes glowing colder in the hellish image forming around him. Retaliate, now. The Demolics kept flying around shooting spells at the Fire WRMS, but it was as if a newbie went into the lair of the final boss all of a sudden. All their attacks were rendered useless on the spot. John raised a hand and his Fire WRMS flew forward, devouring all the undead in his path. I won't kill you. I will make an example of those who dig out my skeletons. Those former enemies he faced once in the past were no longer his opponent. John's stupidly terrifying growth was already something out of the world. The direction he waved his hands and the places where his eyes landed on were the death spots. Nothing survived the rage of the Fire WRMS. But there were powerful undead in the punch. Darius, Gollum, the Laborer, the Minotaur Malvos and some of the Forsworn. They all attacked him systematically from every direction. Ha! You fucktards are longing for a rematch? Fine, I'll destroy all over again. John already had pride, floating above him, and an ebony blade, floating above and shooting magic like a guided turret. Master, let me out. Even Jax called from inside the cube. Jax could feel the enemy that humiliated him out there, even though it is dead now. Malvos, the head of the Minotaurs from the Battle of the Forsworn, was Jax's archenemy. You can have him. John let Jax out and the raging Minotaur charged out from the cube to join the mess. John held the neck of one of the two laborers he killed in Morrowind, and sent him up, then grabbed his feet and started waving him out to hit the others. It was safe to say that using zombies to kill zombies was effective in ways that made John surprised. Between his blade dealing with the strong opponents, his corpse weapon beating the other weak corpses, his staff flying around torching the undead like a machine gun, the swarm of the Fire WRMS setting everything, and his remarkable apprentice Jax breathing fire at its nemesis, it was safe to say that this one-sided bullying was turning the situation into an actual hell. But from the sidelines, two innocent bystanders were simply standing there with their mouths agape. Kellen and Nag were too taken aback by the hellish scene that broke loose all of a sudden. Kellen, this one can take it no more. If he was left doing what he is doing, not a single coin will survive the heat. The Elder Scroll inside may get damaged, Nag said, holding his head. The Elder Scrolls can't be damaged no matter what, but the scene is breaking my heart. We need to do something. Kellen said. The shouted, "Hey brother, go easy on the fire." Despite shouting, John was too absorbed in the battle and didn't really bother. We need to get close to him, Nag spoke. I don't know. He will beat us if we showed uninvited. Then you wait here, this one will do it himself. Nag left Kellen back and charged to the middle of the situation. Wait, Nag, stop it. The reckless Cassia charged in the middle of the fray, aiming to reach his rampaging kinsman. Meanwhile, John noticed him, but he also saw what the three Demolics are doing. The Demolics applied their energies together and started casting a single spell at the same time. He didn't know the nature of the spell, but his alarm protection spell told him to not get hit by it, thus it was of importance to interrupt it right now. John had the ebony blade in a hand while the other was free, which meant he can do it, thus he called forth the fastest weapon he could pull out. The Wabbajack. Not caring for the result of its random effect, it would serve as a good distraction for the time being. But not everything would go as planned. Nag interruption caused the situation to get messy. The Casiat was trying to get to John, but he noticed the 3 Demolics casting magic towards John's back, so he thought if he helps with those 3 skulls, he may be able to earn the other Casiat's trust. But he was in the way of the Wabbajack. "Hey, be careful!" John shouted. "Nag!" Kellen jumped up, seeing his partner getting hit by John's spell coming from the strange black staff. Bang! Star. A large explosion of red smoke occurred when the spell hit Nag, and everyone stopped what they were doing. John retreated his fire WRMS inside him and moved instantly towards the door of the treasure room, stopping Kellen from charging to what can possibly be his demise. "Wait! No, my friend, he's fine, I think." There wasn't enough time to think as the result of the Wabbajack's magic has finally emerged in the room, followed by an utter silence from all the participants in this messy situation. "Okay, that is unexpected on too many scales," John couldn't help but comment. "Nag," Kellen was taken aback seeing what became of his friend. "Don't worry, it is temporary." John patted his shoulder and kept looking at the large creature that the Casiat Nag transformed to. Nag, who turned into a large creature only seen in the wilds of Valenwood, the savannas of Elsewhere, and the jungles of Black Marsh, stopped right where he is and didn't show much of movements. He was closing his eye, but soon he opened them to see his point of view much higher. He looked down to see 3 tiny skulls looking at him with utter silence, then looked to the side where John and Kellen were poker facing. "What is going on? This one is. He tried to speak, but he noticed he is incapable to do so. He tried to move his limbs, but it all felt strange all over his body. He felt something heavy on his face, but soon after he realized it is not a part of his body, and he is. "Where is my fur? Where is my glorious fur?" He was furless, a nightmare to any member of the fur stock. John noticed Naga's movement and understood what is happening next. And panic! Cry! The large creature, that was standing in the treasure room barely fitting in, fell to panic and is about to rampage. "Let's take a few steps back," John said. "This one is Jonia, by the way." John conversed with Kellen while Nag kept running in the room, stomping everything in his wake. A while ago, John was genuinely pissed at the worm cult for digging up his kills, but now he settled down after Naga's interference. With Nag becoming such a ridiculously large creature, John can take it easy, for everything in this treasure room won't survive the rampage of the panicking Nag. John kept watching everything in the room get destroyed by the large creature, and Kellen was at a loss for words until it was all done. Not a single zombie was left under this large feat. Even the 3 Demolics went into hiding and Jax ran behind John. Now that everything is done, let's address the elephant in the room, which is literally accurate. Wow. John walked in to stand in front of the panicking, actual elephant that is Nag. Kellen felt offended for Nag, but John apologized. "Hey there, big guys. Look at me. I am down here." Cry. Star. "It's okay, don't move, don't move. Just stay still." John tried to stop the elephant Nag, but the latter was quite scared of himself. "Remind him of his fur," Kellen called. "Oh right. Shame on me." John realized. "Nag, do you remember your fur, man?" Cry. Star. Nag didn't respond well to that and tried to go through the wall of the room to break free, yet to no avail. "Not working." John ran back out of the room. "I said remind him of his fur. Shouldn't a Casiat like you know how to do that?" Kellen said. "No. But let me try." John walked to Nag once again. "Hey, I can fix you. Just give me a second, okay?" John said as he changed his appearance from Casiat to a redguard in front of Nag. This caused the rampaging elephant to stand still and look carefully. Whimper. Star. "Okay, good." John returned back to Kellen, who was having a second thought on what kind of person they got themselves involved with. What now? Just give it time. He will return to normal in a few minutes. And if he doesn't, the effects of the Wabbajack are not permanent, John said, then turned to Nag. But to think they would make an elephant in the room. Pff. Ah ha ha. John exploded in laughter while the others were speechless by how heartless he is. Hey! Kellen shouted. Okay, let's dispel it. John stopped laughing. Nefertiti, your shadow magic can dispel Daedric magic, right? John spoke to his shadow, which made Kellen feel even weirder. Yes, it can. Woman, can you hold that chicken? She came out in her child form while holding a familiar-looking owl from its legs. The owl was struggling and screaming, but Nefertiti restrained it well. Oh no! Kellen's face went pale. Nefertiti, give it to the mister over here. It is his, John said. Mister, here's your chicken, she said while swallowing her drool. God knows what she was thinking. Kellen retrieved his owl that ran back to him and stood in his shoulders, scared of Nefertiti. Okay, that elephant, John pointed at Nag. Nefertiti turned to see what was there and smiled mischievously. An elephant in the room? She asked. Yep. She held her tummy and started laughing. Oh God. You're awful. Don't you see the poor Cassia suffering? John looked at her with disapproval. Ah ha ha ha. She didn't stop laughing until she had her fill. Meanwhile, Kellen was looking with cold eyes at John. Can you please? John asked. Nefertiti moved almost instantly and appeared beside the elephant in the room. She then used her shadow magic to envelope him in one go, and by the next second, the whole elephant disappeared, leaving only Nag, whose limbs went cold from the traumatic experience. Congratulations! Now you've got your fur back, John said, waving his hands from afar. Nag looked at his arms and felt his face. He was back. The adult Cassia couldn't help but be moved to tears. What did I miss? From behind John and Kellen, a voice came calling for them. Oh, Isha, you haven't missed much. We just handled an elephant and some other stuff, John said. Cool. What about your end? The town is evacuated. I took the people away. Those necromancers are still paralyzed as they are. Did you leave the Catatusker cards as I asked? Yep. I spread them around the town. Once those necromancers come to their senses, they will have one more nickname of yours to worry about. God. I feel so many already. Meanwhile, Nefertiti came out from a pile of gold with 3 demolics tied to 3 shadow strings. Homan, can I keep those? What? No. This is bad. Let go. Jerk. Nefertiti didn't listen and tried to sink in her own shadow, but he held her first. Let go. No. Let go. No, no, no. As the two had their own Homencat argument, Isha took the cube from John and aimed it at the stuff in the room, then started sweeping everything in there inside it. Hey, wait. Please, listen. We request something. Kellen shouted as he saw Isha hoarding everything. First come, first serve. She ignored him. No, we don't want any of that gold. We just want one item. An item that only I can use. It won't be of any use to you. Kellen said. The Elder Scroll? Isha asked. Kellen didn't imagine that his errand was exposed. We're keeping it, Isha said and continued sweeping. Wait. At that time, John interfered. He was entangled with Nefertiti, pulling each other's faces, but the matter seemed important. Hey, Imperial. You are a moth priest, right? John asked. Kellen seemed hesitant, but later he nodded. Good. I'll make you a deal. You read that scroll for me and it is yours. You game? You know, guys, I am really disappointed that no one of you mentioned that Kellen, Nag, and Isha are the first 3 characters that appear in the Elder Scrolls Legends. Chapter 482 Results and Power Up. A double chapters. Also, as I am losing a considerable number of patrons, I am doing changes in at the end of the chapter. Part 1. The saga of Catatosker always contained the most mysterious of thefts, which the scholars throughout history always thought of him to some sort of a hero thief, who relied on stealth to achieve good things, but there was one incident that revealed the real power of Catatosker to the later generation, and that is the tunnel network under Shady Grove Village, in Hammerfell. That day, it was reported that a big number of Catatosker's signature cards were found all over the town. The town was completely stolen under the very eyes of the worm cult and the vampires of the cult of Clavicus Vile. What was known that all the torture camps and the underground vaults became empty all of a sudden with confused necromancers above the ground and hypnotized vampires underground. How did it happen? How could Catatosker liberate a whole village by kidnapping the villagers all at once, and how could he fight all the enemies underground leaving piles of powerful zombies broken apart? It was all a mystery and many theories were built to explain that day. But in the present and the meantime, John himself wasn't thinking of explaining anything to anyone. He was in the middle of a serious magicka training right now. A breakthrough. He was finally experiencing one of those after endlessly getting stuck in the early phase of the Flame Dragon Heart stage ever since he broke through in Narcisse. He felt it while transferring Isha, Nag, and Kellen from Shady Grove to Bergamo where Karim and the Hunding Alliance are. John lately felt that the power of the elements was growing stronger within him. He understood that ascending with his training means facing more restrictions, and this time, he understood more about the binds of the world. The first stage is the dragon robbing as he calls it, or magicka gathering, as it functions. Through it, one gathers enough magicka to break through the first limit and access their astral energy known as the astral access power. This is one of the binds on mortal created when the world was created, and it is the bind of Akatat. The second bind, or rather, the second stage, is what he calls the dragon frame, or functionally known as the frame building stage, where the practitioner breaks a second bind, gaining himself extra lifespan and ridding his body of the effect of age/time, which results to the eternal youth, or what is known the eternal flesh power, becoming immune to diseases. This bind is the bind of a mortal body, or rather, the bind of Arche. Following the same pattern, the third stage breaks another bind, and by the looks of it, it is the elements, the bind of Kinnereth. Such insight was very pivotal for John to finally get his heart straight and shatter the bottleneck. To make it simpler, one must understand the story of creation, where all the spirits were doomed to mortality by Lorcan. The remaining strongest 8 spirits later became 8 plants surrounding the solar system of Nirn. These 8 planets are Akatosh, Arche, Kynareth, Dibella, Mara, Zenithar, Julianos, and Stender. Each of them represents a bind on the world, and these are time, mortality, elements, joy, love, craft, wisdom, and mercy. So in total, it was 8 limits one must break to become immortal. It sounds like a long way for someone like John, who only broke through the binds of time and mortality. One may think that breaking all the 8 binds will take an awfully long time, which is the case, but John could already tell that the bind of the elements is the hardest of all. Imagine someone whose magic is free from the element. This is a huge step, as the elements which are ruled by Kynareth are what keeps reality in order. This means that breaking that bind is key to a grand kind of ascendant. John's mind was having almost 1,000 ideas rampaging all over the place, thinking of the possibilities of his training, but he still kept very firm control over his training. In a few hours, changes started to happen. The fire WRMS that he became lately good at handling was all thanks to the Flame Dragon Heart stage. He was gaining control over some parts of his soul he had no access to before, and started making progress. By the end of the day, a fire storm descended from the sky and tried to devour him, but he fended it off quite easily. The second real heavenly tribulations was over. He is now a middle phase, Flame Dragon Heart stage. His powers have finally increased again. John was absent for one whole day, but the Hunding Alliance could still capture the city of Bergama. The place seemed to have been infiltrated by the worm cult, and the government there was run by them. They accused many citizens of multiple crimes, and sent the corrupt guards after them, looting their homes and arresting their families. Once that was done, all the victims were transported to camps far from the city for soul-squeezing and getting their corpses zombified. How the necromancers managed to get away with that was only thanks to the cooperation of the city lord and his family. They were bribed and corrupt, establishing an order of their own and coming up with laws that restricted all sorts of freedoms. Even those who tried to migrate from the city had to leave everything they owned behind and only travel with what each person can carry. The city lord silenced every person of authority who spoke against him and turned many buildings that were dedicated to public service into prisons and dungeons. All that with the full cooperation of the guards who lost their purpose for their greed, and here, when Karim and the Hunding Alliance arrived. Karim didn't need John to go through an investigation. He had the governor of Gilane with him, who had Bergama under his authority. When the Lord of Bergama refused to open the gates for the alliance, the governor of Gilane charged with Karim until the two scaled the walls during the night, then called for the people of Bergama to revolt and save themselves first so that they can open the gates for the alliance. It went bloody inside the town for a while, 6 hours, until the people managed to take the family of the governor as hostages, which caused discord between the city lord and the governor. The guards went into chaos and the defense fell in shambles. The Hunding Alliance entered the city, and not long after, all the necromancers were gathered and killed along with some traitors. Once John and the ones with him arrived, the situation was already over. John gathered a group of hunting chargers and asked Karim to lead them first inside the Alakar desert to aid the citadel of Ebenarm. The rest of the alliance will have to follow in its pace after them, and Karim agreed to that. By the next day, John left Jax with Karim and led his team alongside 200 chargers of Strozmkai into the desert, aiming for the old citadel south to Sentinel. It would take 2 days in John's buffs to travel to the citadel, and so they had to spend a night in the desert fending themselves from the undead that came from literally everywhere. John chose the campsite to be positioned on a small rocky hill so the roads could be monitored and secured them tightly. During the night, he has a meeting with Isha, Beth, Mirren, and Miranda. "So, any news?" John asked. "Not much," Beth replied, "but we are approaching a very strong fate. Maybe I'll find out tomorrow." Beth didn't seem to be able to divine better the nearer they get to the center of the soul snare spell. "I get it. Don't overwork yourself, we can send you back to a safer place in case you needed a better spot," John said. "I need to be nearer to you and to whatever that fate so that I can get a clearer picture. I'm afraid we are out of options but to do some parts blindly." "It's okay. We will try to contact both the Citadel and Sentinel to save time. I'll leave that to you, Mirren." John spoke to Mirren. Yeah, just stop dragging and show us the stuff you stole already." Mirren was more interested in something else. "Fine, you asked for it." John too was excited to show off the good stuff. King Orgnum's coffer, Mormor. Once a day, the coffee will generate gold coins of random origin. The first item was none other than the coffer of King Orgnum, the immortal king of the Mormor, Sea Elves. It was a strong box made of blue aquatic malachite with serpentine engravings all around it. A coffer that can make gold out of nothing. Now that's something to look at, Isha exclaimed. "It doesn't make gold out of nothing," John and Miranda replied at the same time. The smartest two in the group could understand the secret of the coffer from the first glance. "It is light, almost weightless. Space magic is involved," Miranda said. "Judging from the various types of gold coins, this coffer collects coins from all over the world. My best guess is that it can hoard all the sunken treasures from all parts of the sea. Look at those, if I am correct, these are Akaviri gold teals." John's estimation was based on an educated guess from his experience with the white phial. Nothing can create something from nothing other than God. Still, the legends tell that once someone acquires it, it will give them a ridiculous amount of riches to the point where it puts the wealthiest of merchants to shame. Then it disappears to find another master. Mirren said. I'm already one of the wealthiest merchants in the world. Who is the wealthiest right now? John asked. Jeffian Bessos from Alinar and Bilis Gaseous from Cyrodiil. Miranda replied. Now these are some scary names for some reason, John said. Well, as long as I get wealthier than them, I don't mind. John took King Orgnum's coffer and placed it in his treasury inside the cube. Part 2. Draconian Madstone, Akaviri. Resist poison. Resist disease. The next item was an Akaviri amulet known as the Draconian Madstone. It is nothing Sheogorathian or related to madness of the sort, but it is very known to be one of the valuables prized by the Counts of Bruma. The legends say that the stone gives its wearer immunity to both poison and disease, but from what it seemed, it is only 50%. John is already immune to disease, for he has a youthful body that doesn't age, but the resistance to poison is very needed at the moment for the fight against Zane. Isha promised John to train him to be resistant to poison, but they didn't have much time because of the drama that kept happening lately, thus the stone will be used by John. I'm already wearing a greater amulet of Talos and a greater token of Kine. I look like some punk wearing all that around my neck. John complained. Aims justify the means, John. Miranda shut him up. Flask of Lilandril, Elven. Magic Absorb. Magic Reflect. The following item was a marvel of its own. The Flask of Lilandril is an artifact prized by the High Elf. It was used by Cyrus, the hero of Strozmkai, to defeat the necromancer Ngasta. Not just that, it is very resistant to magic, making it the ultimate anti-magic weapon. I think this goes to you. John passed it to Mirren and Miranda. The two were taken aback as they didn't really want any part of the booty. There was a reason. I'm not snooping around your secrets, but you two seem to have a lot going on with the Altmare upper society. If I am correct and you are high elf nobles, then this goes back to you by the right of heritage. John may be a collector, but he wouldn't let such valuable things rot when someone needs it more than him, especially if that someone is his friend. Horn of Jaderi, Dragonbone. Paralyzed dragons. Damaged dragons. This was another marvel. A very ancient dragon horn that goes back to the days of the First Era. Dragon horns are legendary artifacts created primarily by the Dragon Guard, used as weapons against the dragons. They are magical war horns carved out of the horns of dragons, inscribed with various arcane runes, and are capable of producing a tonal sound that incapacitates dragons. They, however, will have no effect if used against the dragon the horn originated from. They are very fragile and can break instantaneously and crumble to dust after just a few uses, thus it was rare to see one surviving to the Fourth Era. The Horn of Jaderi is a combat dragon horn noted for its unique ability to never break. It was given to Jaderi, a member of the Pride of Alkosh, by its donor Nafalar, the very red dragon that in Cyrus' Book of Circle, which was gifted to John by Karim, was created from. Jaderi herself was a Khajiit champion of Alkosh, the Khajiiti aspect of Akatosh. Another known dragon horn is the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller, that very horn that the Greybeards send the Dragonborns to recover. The horn was large, almost as tall as John, and its power felt dormant, but John knew it can be recharged by the lunar energy he can utilize now. John suggested to keep it in case it was needed. Of course no one bought the fact that this thing will be needed, for no one believed in fairy tales of dragons. Deadland Hammer, Daedric. Create Iron Atronax. Hazardous on direct contact. Not a very well-known Daedric artifact, but this silver bright hammer can do some serious damage. Its original function is to create iron atronachs from liquidated substances that contain a large amount of metal. Iron atronachs are golems rather than real atronachs, but their power is something to behold along with their scary appearance. Why is hazardous on direct touch? Isha asked. Because it draws metal from liquid substances. For example, your blood. John answered. Blood? What does it have to do with metal? A whole lot, my friend. A whole lot. This artifact was put in a safe chest for containment. Ice Blade of the Monarch Elven Steel. Frost damage. Freeze. Another artifact of great power. The Ice Blade of the Monarch is called one of Tamriel's most prized artifacts. Legend has it that the evil archmage Ami Anselmo enchanted the claymore of a great warrior with the soul of a frost monarch, a stronger form of the more common frost atronach. The warrior, Thurgnarasi, was to play a part in the assassination of a great king in a far-off land and become the new leader. The assassination failed and the archmage was imprisoned. The ice blade freezes all who feel its blade. Someone among us is a good sword master and in need of an excellent blade. John passed it to Mirren. Oh, how very thoughtful, John. Elder Scroll, forgotten, Elder. And here came the last artifact found in the treasure room of the cult of Clavicus Vile. An Elder Scroll. The Elder Scroll of the Forgotten? I forgot a lot of things, so this will help me remember? John asked. It is better if you don't touch it, Beth said, making John put it away. Is there anything wrong? These things are very tied to fate. Your fate is to acquire 3 Elder Scrolls, and that is not one of the 3, am I right? She said. Okay. John felt disheartened upon hearing that. Well, you have brought yourself a moth priest. I think you can at least ask him to read it. See what you forgot? Isha said. That's what I intend to do, but we need to reach the citadel first. I don't want to risk anything. John said. Good. What is the plan once we reach it? Mirren asked. Simple. Assess the situation, repel the undead, make an advanced plan, meet with the Imperials and give a serious chase to the worm cult. John said. You're realizing that the more we go in, the more things get harder? Miranda said. We are out of options at the moment. At least we powered up and have new stuff to fight with. I am sure that they will prove useful. John said, then turned to Isha. About confronting Zane. The situation became chilly all of a sudden as they all turned silent. You won't leave him for me? She asked. I can't. You know it is dangerous and you can't win. But it won't be just me. Last time almost got him by combining our efforts. He has a body that doesn't feel pain or get tired. He is more ridiculous than any vampire or werewolf. Don't forget that he is a hybrid. We can't risk that. John's claims were serious and true. No one can face Zane that way. What will make things worse if the reincarnation of Manamarco manage to possess Zane's? This will be a disaster. Miranda added. I get it. Isha shouted and stood up. What is important right now is the living, not the dead. We need to get to the citadel. I think the horses had enough rest. She stormed out of the tent and the others sighed in unison. It was hard to reason with her like that. You all know what to do, John said. The others nodded and cleared the tent. Then John redid his disguise and went out as High Mage Krylon. He ordered the battalion under him to be mobile in 2 minutes. A few hours later, John entered the area where the citadel used to control. The situation was dire as many citadel apprentices were seen walking around as undead. The first line of defense was shattered and many checkpoints were raided by the necromancers. After a few encounters in the night, John and his group arrived in the vicinity of the citadel. The large domes were seen with the sunrise of the next day. John and his group came from the east with the sun rising behind them. They rode on swift horses and met a large force of undead besieging the main citadel. Charge! Don't stop until you reach the gates of the citadel. John gave the order and charging formation split the lines of the undead with John spearheading the attack. He raised Pride up and drew energy directly from the sunlight, then cast a terrifying spell called Sun Strike. A raw blast of sun energy disintegrated all sorts of undead in its wake, leaving but a trail of glowing energy on the ground. The necromancers noticed the coming reinforcements and tried to stop it, but the horses were too fast to be stopped. "Open the gates!" Isha rode faster on her storm horse Atronak, arriving at the gates of the citadel first and revealing her face. The gate opened as soon as Isha was seen, and the 200 riders slid in, leaving behind nothing but angry necromancers grinding their teeth. As soon as Isha asked about what happened, grim news arrived to her by a female adept. "Senior Isha, you are the highest rank here in the citadel. The elders, they are besieged in the valley of the Ansei Pyramid. Asterisk, 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 new stuff. I've updated the ranks and the tiers, making new stuff. I didn't offer more than before, but here is a deal. I'll publish 10 chapters from each novel I am working on for free, the rest will be exclusive to C-rank tier. These novels are Reboot, Relife System, The Unholy Mage, The Villainous Returns with a System, A Shadow Combat, King Rune, Beast of the Apocalypse. I'll return with more early access for Dragonborn Saga once I hoard more chapters. I'm learning how to make YouTube content or stream, but it is taking me some time to decide what to do. I have SSEs, so I guess I'll do guides to transform your Skyrim into Dragonborn Saga, but it will take some time. Chapter 483, John Dare Going Wild. Pretty big thanks to the new patrons that joined us. At BH Mager, C rank. At Nathan Bailey, D rank. At Martin Custer, E rank. Senior Isha, you are the highest rank here in the Citadel. The elders, they are besieged in the valley of the Ansei Pyramid. As if things couldn't get any worse, now the top brass of the Citadel were in their own situation, as it seemed. Somehow, the whole situation was taking a turn for the worse very fast. Isha didn't want to reply or say anything, but she was out of options. The whole village was attacked and only the Citadel remained. She had to take charge. "How did they leave you here without any leadership?" she asked. The other senior adepts, the battlelords and the elders who were in charge, were either killed or fatally injured. The situation is turning chaotic, and we don't know what to do. The adept replied. "Fuck." Isha cursed out loud, and wanted to just get rid of everything all at the same time, but she had no better choice. "Krylin, please heal all those elders and battlelords while I take care of the situation," she said. "All right, the chargers can either rest or help you. They are under your command." John left the leading business to Isha and went on inside the citadel to act as the healer, but before that, he drew a large rune on the ground and, supported with soul gems, then cast the master-level restoration spell, Light of Aetherius. All the wounded were getting healed, and all the corruption was being driven away. Despite the spectacular scene of the spell that formed a dome above the citadel, it is not focused enough to heal the gravely wounded or damage the powerful undead. John had to go personally and heal the battlelords with his best potions and healing spells. It amazing to see him utilizing his 2 hands and to Pride, casting 3 spells at the same time. It even happened that Nag and Kellen, who were taken prisoners in John's cube, offered to help. After that, John returned to Isha, who managed to organize the defense forces and fended off a wave of undead. The amount of undead here is huge. No matter what we kill, they keep coming back. I never knew the soul snare spell could have the effect of maintaining undead to reanimate them again, she said. "I see. We need to damage the undead beyond repair then," John concluded. "That's impossible for us at the moment. If you can support us from the back, we can." Isha was about to suggest something, but John stopped her. "No, I'm done playing games. I'll handle this on my own. Tell the chargers to keep up." he said and removed his mask Krylon off his face. What are you doing? She asked. He didn't reply and hurriedly found his way to Beth, who was napping with Nefertiti. Midget, I want it, he spoke. Want what? She rubbed her eyes while getting up. That blessing you promised, is it good? He asked. Right, for the heist task. I don't know. Lady Boethiah is the one who chooses, she said. Fine. Call her or bring her on the line or whatever, he said impatiently. Okay, geez. Which one of us is the child? She stopped him and stood up, then looked up at him. You may want to get down, she said. Okay. John went down on one knee. You're tall, a bit more on my eye level. That's it. She fixed him close to her, then held his face. She then went closer to his forehead and headbutt. Ouch. Hey, what was that? He said, scratching his forehead with a finger. That hurts. She held her forehead with both hands in pain. What is your skull made of? That really hurts. I'm being serious here. He glared at her. So am I. But apparently, I couldn't make you understand that waking someone from their nap is rude. I'm not your cat. I don't wake Nefertiti from her nap. Now, the blessing, he said. Mere physical contact was enough. You've got your blessing. Buzz off. Beth was annoyed, but John seemed more displeased with her behavior. Still, he got himself a blessing. With a little focus, he could understand what that blessing was. This is really suitable. John smiled after having such a cool gift in this time of need. He patted the cheeky girl's head and walked away. He summoned out the gauntlet, Wraithguard, and the hammers, Sunder and Deadland Hammer. Each in a hand, of course. Pride was floating above him. Once he reached the citadel's gate, he called out Greed and took off the ebony mail. While covering himself with Greed, John commanded it to go inside, Wraithguard, and unleash its second form. In a second, John got a complete new transformation. Instead of his usual ebony armor, he is now in a brass Dwemer chainmail called Wrath Mail, made of thousands of rings. Wraith Mail, Dwemer. All resistance. Fortify strength. Aegis. Reflect all greed effect. It was the ultimate armor for a melee fight, crafted by the most brilliant Dwemer crafts lord who doomed his race and boosted by the ridiculous potential awakening powers of greed. John used this form of Wraithguard, for the artifact was only a single gauntlet and he is going to use a couple of very dangerous hammers. This at least meant he won't be harmed that much. Sunder, Dwemer. Elemental damage. Soul damage. Deadland Hammer, Daedric. Create Iron Atronax. Hazardous touch. Open the gate. John gave the gate guard a chilling glare which made the latter do what is told without thinking. John walked past the opening gates under everyone's gazes and smiled like a maniac. His aura formed a thick exoskeleton around him as he was eyed by the necromancers and their undead. Catch that man! The necromancers shouted. John got instantly pissed and felt like smashing that guy's head the most painful way possible. To the onlookers, John looked like a madman wearing a ridiculously expensive Dwemer chainmail and holding a hammer each hand, with his red hair giving him a remarkable appearance. This madman spread his arms, raising the two hammers to his shoulders level. Then his aura started to agitate like a real madman. Boethiah! He called for the name of Boethiah, and all of a sudden, his agitated aura started burning like a flame. The man himself was already running forward, as if he lost his damn mind. Ah ha ha ha! Sovngarde, you sons of bitches! Sovngarde! And that was a Nord shouting a battle cry, laying waste to all in his wake. He charged forward with the two hammers in hand, then came across some large undead that he didn't identify in his feral state of mind. Still, once he came in contact with whatever that undead was, one swing from asunder, was enough to turn half of that thing into shreds and the other half flew somewhere. It didn't matter as the next victim was being blasted by the Deadland hammer in the next instant. Die. Ah. I'll kill you all. John didn't stop shouting as he became alone in between undead horde. We must help him. Miranda wanted to run after John, but Isha held her. Look closer. As she pointed, John was indeed surrounded, being attacked from all directions, but he didn't look like someone who was trapped, but rather, he was trapping them. The undead creatures and the cultists that surrounded John were all trying to get a piece of him, but let alone the wraith male. His own skin was impossible to harm by their weak attacks. He kept still with a mad smile, but once he got a fair number of enemies around him, he finally reacted. I wanted to try this in a long time. Whirlwind. As if a child was given a new toy, John used and abused the blessing of Boethiah to the best of his ability. He replicated a certain skill from a certain game by waving, spreading his arms, and rotating around himself, creating a storm with his aura. In most cases, this shouldn't work even with aura, but the special state his aura was in allowed such anomaly to happen. With each turn he took, undead shattered and cultists were slain. A mound of corpses and a river of blood formed around. No matter how fast the worm cultists were at raising the dead, they were unable to keep up with John's speed at damaging their zombies. Those who saw that from the citadel defenses felt a chill down their spines as they watched one man single-handedly overwhelm the dead army that drove them to hiding. I've never seen a martial skill like that before. How does it even work? Isha felt the creeps when John started whirling around. Isn't this the same as the whirling sword dervishes? Miranda asked. No, the dervishes employ accuracy in their whirls, so the two swords are two different attacks, but what he is doing is just whirling. Don't tell me that idiot has invented a martial art of his own. Mirren wanted to facepalm. John's state was unique, but he showed a familiar state of mind to a certain fighting style Isha witnessed before, but John had his own style over it. Meanwhile, John didn't stop with the whirlwind attack. Haha, that's so much fun. What's next? Leap, ground stomp, cleave, weapon throw. John had his fun reviving every fictional martial skill that came to mind, until he exhausted most of the cultists. His weapon throw attack launched sunder at a formation of worm warlocks, blasting them to pieces. With them, he took care of half the undead army. John also threw the Deadland hammer in one of the blood and flesh lakes he caused to happen after aimlessly destroying the undead. He was now free of weapons. Let's do this the classic way, he said while cracking his fingers. Cookies Festival. And the heavenly wrath followed his grim announcement as his two fists glowed with lightning magic each. Those who were unfortunate enough to be in the way of his fists wished they were killed by the hammer instead. All of you will die. Such a ridiculous person was running and hitting everything in his way while ignoring all manners of attacks that were completely useless against him. At this point, resistance was merely wishful thinking. John noticed the necromancers trying to retreat, so he left whoever he was hitting and took a high leap towards to block their way. You demon! You get away! The same necromancer that ordered the others to capture him at first was crawling backward, trying to get away from him. John stepped on the man's robe, stopping him from escaping, then looked away, his eyes watching a certain place carefully. It was the same place he threw the Deadland hammer, in that lake that was filled with blood and flesh. Blood was a perfect substance alongside earth and bones to create what's going to show up next. Mere seconds later, John felt it coming. Look. He pointed at the location of the Deadland hammer, and those who were curious enough looked at where he pointed. Sure as hell something was out of place. From the puddles of blood and corpses, few creatures started to form. It is as if the twisted reality was creating an abomination of its own. Those who saw it felt a chill of terror grasping their hearts. After it formed, 7 colossal creatures stood up with unnatural shape. At first, one might mistake them for very ugly frost atronachs, but their metallic gleam revealed what they are. Iron atronachs. It was as if a bunch of metal spikes came together and formed an atronach. If that is not the coolest thing ever, then I don't know what it is, John said. These naturally sharp creatures walked their first steps towards the battlefield that had numerous undead roaming around. Clueless of what to do, they just stood still. John raised his 2 hands up and called for his marks on both the Sunder and the Deadland hammer. The 2 hammers flew up and hurled towards John until they landed in his hands. John held the Deadland hammer closer and spoke to it. Kill! With those orders, the death machines on standby moved with hostility towards the enemies of their creator. Just as heartless as they looked, one move was enough to mince a whole bunch of high-level zombies. Don't you see? Quantity may be good but quality, that's the beauty of supremacy. John spoke to the necromancer before dropping the hammer on his head. By the next 10 minutes, the whole undead legion was no more. Blessing of Boethiah. Berserk. Take half damage and do double damage in a feral state of mind, active. Chapter 484 Beth's Prophecy. First, thanks for becoming patrons. At Yasser M. Almutiri, D. rank. At Andrew 5517, E. rank. About the live stream, I think that it is a bit impossible for one reason. Egypt's internet sucks. I've tried Twitch and Live, but they both failed miserably because of my internet speed, 5 megabits per second. Still, somehow I managed to go live of Discord, which was actually working well. Sadly, it can't take more than 10 spectators. Now, my next option is a YouTube channel. I'll start dusting off those good Windows Millennium Movie Maker skills of mine, and see what I can do. I'm open to content suggestions. John always thought that if he ever gets a blessing if Shiagarath, it would be Berserk blessing, but it turned out to be something different from what he thought. But now, he finally got a berserking blessing form, the warrior Daedric Prince Boethiah. As an adrenaline junkie, John would lose the thrill of many things if he got used to it. That's why a berserking blessing was an answer to his prayers. Sadly, berserking had some of the nastiest side effects. First, it made John's body feel like he was in an orgy with some female giants. Even John wasn't sure if he could handle such a heavy load. Second, he had a very nasty hangover that felt like his head was being hosted in the movie Saw for 3 consecutive executions that involved that jaw-splitting reverse bear trap. He had to go through an emergency anti-hangover treatment that proved to be a challenge. In the end, Job recovered and learned to be careful with such power from now on. It is more of physical damage blessing, which makes it good for desperate situations. Yet for now, John was done screwing around, and by screwing around it means going wild and mass-murdering evil people. He had to put his shit together and go after the Ansei Pyramid. With the citadel of Ebenarm secured and under the command of a proper battlelord, John had to lead his squad in the desert again to rescue the elders of the citadel trapped in the Ansei Pyramid Valley. This also meant invading the Dead Sand region with a large force, the thing that can turn fatal with the least accident. He had to send Nefertiti to personally scout first. He then led a force of 200 hunting chargers and 300 citadel adepts into the region after fixing the bridge of bone he made. Of course he encountered strong necromancers in the way, and he put them down using the fastest and dirtiest tactics in the book. One of the most important things to take note of was how he utilized lust to change his looks every few minutes since the battle in front of the citadel. All those he kills are either the followers of Clavicus Vile or Manimarco, which meant that their souls are doomed to either higher entity. These souls carry the vivid memories of his death, which is why John had to keep a low profile even when acting wild. The idea of multiple strong individuals wreaking havoc around the plans of those higher entities will make them act slower, which is what he needed at the moment, at least until Karim and General Cassia arrive with large forces. Anyway, John has managed to reach the center of the dead sand to the valley of the pyramid only to find a true challenge waiting for him. The worm cult had its master necromancers and arch-necromages to battle the masters of the citadel of Ebonarm. To summarize the result, it was dire. The sword and the bow battlelords were killed. The sword battlelord destroyed his own body upon death, but the bow battlelord's corpse was taken by the necromancers and was being mummified. The other battlelord, which are the staff, spear, saber, martial, and magic battlelords, as well as the war chief of the citadel. It was safe to say that John used his best tactics to get rid of the annoying zombie bow battlelord before killing her and trapping her soul in a safe container that she doesn't get pulled back to the soul snare formation. Regarding the necromancers, Mirren and Miranda had to keep them at bay, while Isha took down the weakest ones among them by the Spear of Bitter Mercy to diminish their firepower. It worked at first after she killed 3 masters, but the numbers of those masters were just too overwhelming. Isha was about to get killed if not for John's master plan working at the last moment. He had Nefertiti sneak him and Wrath through the shadow world. Wrath appeared in the middle of the undead army and shouted his howl of death, claiming most of the undead under his control and assassinating 2 masters in one sword stroke. The remaining ones were John's. In the shadow, he was preparing a big spell just for them. EMP, that was its name, and it stood for Electro-Magical Pulse. A devastating master level that doesn't target the physical forms but rather the astral forms. Once the electro-magical pulse happens, all the energy points in the bodies of the hostile will face a temporary shutdown until they get a hold of themselves. That short time is enough to slaughter more than a dozen masters. And that's how things happened. John appeared from who knows where and landed on the ground with his spell breaking the ranks of the masters apart. He then moved his hands around breaking necks before getting his sword to cut those necks instead. For now, most of the worm cult's masters in the Alikar desert were dealt with, but a few escaped and a signal was given to a greater army of undead to come. This time, even John himself was taken into account multiple times, and so they had to abandon the Ansei pyramid and retreat to the citadel. Of course, after saving the elders of the citadel. Master! Isha! Isha saw Nagla and ran towards her, almost tripping like a child. Isha. I saw. Yes. I know what you saw. I saw him as well. Isha calmed her master. The elder battlelords were in bad shape after a long time in seclusion from the world in the Ansei pyramid. Where is he? We don't see him anywhere. John asked Nagla. Zane, That's not my brother. They stole his body like the other undead. Isha tried to calm Nagla. No, you don't understand. Nagla begged to listen. He spoke to me before killing Farida and Nidal. We know he can speak, John said. And he took Zara, Nagla said. This was an absolute shock to them. What she said just now made Isha and the others freeze. Zane came and took his wife Zara. What is going on here? Was it a part of a grand scheme or a plan, or was Zane remembering things like being a corpse driven by love? Can a corpse feel love? And if it does, is he really just a corpse? It was safe to assume that this is what is going around inside everyone's head. No, it can't. He tried to kill me. Surprisingly enough, Isha was the first one to deny it. The others soon came to their senses after hearing what Isha said. To kill you? Nagla was taken aback. Yes. In Elsewhere, we ran into him on a job, then chased him for 3 weeks all the way here. Joe. Krylin was injured by the poison of the serpent spear. A few could utilize the spear of my family to make it produce poison, so surely it was Zane, but he has gone through something horrible. Isha kept going on and on about Zane's situation yet. That doesn't explain why he kidnapped Zara, John said. He didn't, Nagla said. Woman, I'll fucking beat yo. She went with him on her own, Nagla continued. Oh. John was both embarrassed and taken aback, but the situation was too hairy for him to care. So, he just let her go with him? Miranda asked. No, she was with us until he showed up. Once she saw him, she could no longer think straight and he got to her. We were all too stunned to do anything, but the damage was already done and he took her away. Other than that, I don't know. Nagla didn't seem well as she held her head. So they left? John had a bad feeling about this. We can track them. Suddenly from the side, a man came and interfered. He was a redguard with a bronze-colored hair, fielding short braids, and a well-kept single-knot beard. Ilander Disha. Krylin. I see you have lived through this, friend. I did. It was Ilander, John's friend from the Citadel and his guide in the deserts of Alakar, who discovered the Ansei pyramid with him. You said you can track them? John asked. Yes. During the fight, when my master was near defeat, he destroyed his own body so that he doesn't get reanimated as undead, but he also left a trace on Zane. I know I am not strong enough to avenge my master, but I can guide you to his exact location, even if it is in oblivion. I believe you, mate, and sorry for your loss. John patted Ilander's shoulder and felt the urge to do something about the situation, but Zara's matter may have complicated things to a strange degree. A guide will be of use. At that time, someone else butted in. What is it, Shorty? John turned to Beth, who acted as someone important. This is... Ilander and Nagla reacted to Beth's sudden appearance. Beth was there with Nefertiti standing behind her. The two girls seemed to have formed some kind of a bond which made Nefertiti agree to take Beth around through her shadow portals. This girl is Beth, prophetess of Boethiah. She's weird, but she's just a brat. John introduced her. So, what were you saying? I was saying that a guide will prove of use, but there is more you need to know, right? Yes, about Zara, Isha was about to ask, but Beth raised a hand. I am sorry, but regardless of the method she was taken by, the reason that happened was to mess with you and make you think that your brother is still in there somewhere, Beth said. Yeah, even Isha thinks so, Mirren said. Yes, and now she is certain. The worm cult would take all the extra miles to hinder the Maiden of the Spear, so please, stay focused. Also, aren't there some injured you need to take care of? Beth's words made Nagla almost go pale. I'll go see my elder sister. Isha, please help me with her, she was poisoned by Zane's spear. Nagla said. The war chief is poisoned? Isha almost went pale. Yes, let's hurry. Hearing that the war chief of the Citadel of Ebonarm was injured in a critical state meant actions needed to be taken right away. The war chief is known to be a strong spearwoman, and John wanted to meet her, but Beth stopped him. She also stopped Mirren and Miranda. I've news for you. She spoke to them. What? Do you remember the dream I kept seeing? 3 swords, 1 spear, and a ship with bloody sails? Beth asked. Yes. I think we understood it wrong. Thanks to the champion of Boethiah, I was guided to look in both the past and the future to find answers and clues. Now I fully understand the dream. Go on. At first, I thought it meant the Spear of Bitter Mercy alongside the Ebony Blade, the Soul Sword, and another sword that will reveal itself later on, but I was mistaken about the swords. The real 3 swords are the Ansei wards that were made in this place, the Ansei Pyramid. Ansei wards were 3 ancient Redguard relics that contained the spirits of powerful Ansei warriors. They were created in the First Era to fight the threat of necromancy in the Alakar Desert. According to Beth's later explanation, during the First Era, when the Yokudan rulers were still establishing a foothold in the Alakar, they faced a great threat from a group of elven necromancers. Legend states that the necromancers of that time were far more powerful than those that came in later eras. According to Redguard tradition, striking the dead carries with it a terrible curse and is considered an act of dishonor. Because of this, fighting back against necromancy proved difficult. In response, 3 Ansei heroes, Maja, Raiden, and Halila sacrificed themselves to protect the Alakar from the risen dead. As part of a covenant with Tuwaka, they pledged their souls and each Ansei channeled their spirit into the blade they wielded in life. This even happened here in the Ansei Pyramid. These swords became known as the Ansei Wards, and as long as the dead are consecrated in the name of Tuwaka, they could not be raised by even the most powerful necromancy. The wards were locked in a fortified subterranean storehouse below Sentinel, known as the Impervious Vault, and sealed with a magical barrier. The spirit of each Ansei remained tied to their ward, meaning it would be with it at all times. Right now, we need to head to Sentinel and figure out a method to use those swords. We have the champion of Boethiah, who is a strong sword master, and we have the 2 former laborers of Mephala. I am not a good sword master, Miranda said. We'll figure something out. Beth ignored her. What about that last thing? The red sail ship? John asked. Beth took a deep breath before replying. 3 days from now, on the 20th of Rain's Hand, April, a ship will arrive at the western shores of Hammerfell. If it landed, we are doomed. 3 days later, Isha sat near a fire sharpening her spear, thinking about what went down. She was calm, silent, and calculative. She was thinking of the countless fights she had in the past 3 days and the one up ahead. Across the fire sat 2 men, the Imperial Moth priest Kellen and the Khajiit adventurer Nag. They were set free and given the Elder Scroll they came for. Kellen read from the scroll and had a calm face, digesting all the knowledge he just received. He was thankful for the experience he lived through reading the scroll and the knowledge he gained. Now it was his time to tell a story. The Elder Scrolls show us what was, and what yet will be, and they have revealed much to me, he said. Spare us your stories, old man, unless they can sharpen spears. Our war chief is dying. Our enemies are massing for another attack. We must prepare for battle. Isha replied, not wanting anyone to interrupt the ideas she had in mind. We should go, Kellen. We have the scroll we came for. This one smells blood in the wind. Nag asked Kellen to leave. Patience, Nag. I have words yet to speak here. Stories can do surprising things, Spear Maiden, whether they are true or not. And this is one you should hear. It comes from the Great War that nearly ended the Empire. It began when the High Elves slaughtered every Imperial blade. Calling themselves the New Aldmeri Dominion, they and their allies swept through the land, even capturing the Imperial city itself. The Emperor fled north, leaving Cyrodiil to the invaders. He took a deep breath and smiled at Isha, to Nag, and to the others who were resting around the fire. This is the story of a forgotten hero who changed the very course of history. Chapter 485 Legends 1 Odd Fate. This small spin-off will only be 3 to 4 chapters. The sole purpose I'm adding it is because most of you don't even know the existence of the Elder Scrolls Legends and its 3 main stories. Just to let you know, the 3rd story is vital for the future chapters. The story of a forgotten hero who changed the very course of history. Kellen. Somewhere south of Cyrodiil, 25 years ago. It was dark and damp in the cold cage. He couldn't remember when was the last time he saw the light of day after the night where his caravan of refugees was raided by Aldmeri soldiers after the fall of the Imperial city. A few survived the raid, but most didn't survive what came after. Until now, he was forced to fight for his life against all kinds of shitty opponents, starting from wild dogs all the way to wolves and bears, but what really got to him was when the Aldmeri soldiers abandoned the garrison, leaving him rotting in a cell. Yet not a day after, another group moved in. Daedric cultists. As if the world didn't have enough of man-hating elves, now he has to deal with the everyone-hating cultists. These cultists were cruel, and the vicious circle, that is the arena of the garrison, continued once again, this time against scamps, skeletons, and all manner of nasty creatures. He was even forced to fight innocents and slay them, surviving barely by the width of a blade's tip, yet the day he is the victim was on and about. Bring me a warrior with strength and courage. That Nord looks adequate, bring the mortal forth. Called the leader of the Daedric cult, the Draemora lord known as Reeve. He scanned with his vicious eyes through the fighter slaves in the cages, picking out a strong Nord with a mighty build. Then he looked again to pick an opponent. As for his opponent, that one. Reeve was pointing towards him, who is the longest surviving fighter slave so far. It was clear as day that they are bored with him, and want the large Nord to crush him in one go. After all, an Imperial like him didn't possess anything but luck when comes to fight, which clearly had run out. He was dragged out of his cage and thrown in the pit against the Nord. What a large man, he thought. Fighting this Nord needs a lot more than luck. Speed, accuracy, and focus are needed all at once. The Nord, on the other hand, looked carefree despite being another fighter slave. This is also good, it is a sign of underestimation. If this goes well. Swoosh. And it clearly didn't. The Nord sent him a straight jab, launching him 2 meters backward before the permission to fight was given. The cultists laughed and the Daedra Reeve didn't mind it. It was all for the good anyway. Sorry, mate. Better your blood than mine. The Nord spoke. He stumbled up while staggering backward. Once he hit the wall of the pit, he found an old battle-axe left in the mud from the previous fight. Seems like the cultists didn't notice it. The Nord walked closer, so it was the chance. He fingered pain and acted like he was protecting himself by shrinking down, yet once the Nord was in range, he held to the axe and swung it, trying to take the Nord's head. Whoa! The Nord evaded with superhuman flexibility and stepped away. Nice swing. The Nord was okay about it and took extra steps away, then looked for the cultists to throw him a weapon. He got a sword and the two returned to the fight again on equal terms, but the Nord seemed reluctant while fighting. He didn't show the best of his moves and kept attacking half-heartedly. As the fight lasted over a minute, the cultists got bored and started booing. Some went for a drink, and even the Draemor himself went somewhere. You're pretty good with that axe. We work together, we might have a chance. At that time, the Nord engaged in a closer clash with him, and spoke in a careful tone. You want me to drop my guard? Never. But he wouldn't, for he went into many similar situations during the past. Well, who knows how much time has passed. The Nord smiled. Suit yourself, but believe me when I tell you, there is a chance. At the moment, the Nord spoke calmly, but in the next, he unleashed a scary pressure by some sort of power. Aura! It was not a common power among the foot soldiers and the commoners, but it is an art that set 2 levels apart. Sure enough, he recognized it. Facing an aura master of all things, today really was not his lucky day, but luck was playing a different game here. The Nord never meant to attack him, but rather threw his swords over the pit, shattering a part of the inner wall to the underground prison, locking the way up. Ha ha! I'm Tyr. One of the blades. The Nord said. A blade. The man was taken aback. A blade in this kind of place? Rumor has it that the Aldmeri Dominion slew them all. But then again, the blades are elites devoted to protecting the Emperor. Let alone the aura, each one of them is above any common knight or Imperial legionnaire. At that moment of confusion, the Daedric cultists around the pit were reacting to Tyr's action. They reached out to their weapons and staves facing Tyr and... What was your name again? Tyr asked. I'm Glemet. Fine, Glem. Now it's 2 of us, a dozen of them, it's almost a fair fight. Tyr joked, but Glemet was more concerned about the situation he's in. Without saying much, the cultists attacked. You'll never escape. Reeve will destroy you. One came charging at Glemet waving a sword, so he had to avoid and counterattack. Glemet could see the attack, and a strange thing happened to him. He felt like he can face that cultist despite the difference in strength. He evaded once and twice, but as he was about to be hit, his mind opened to many possibilities, as if he could see more than one just way to handle this. He chose the smartest one, and that was by evading down, then attacking, then doing a leg sweep to break the cultist's balance, and with that, his opponent was on the ground. The feeling of victory almost got to him, but his sense of crisis encouraged him to chop that cultist's neck while he is down. "You're done? Let's leave." As Glemmet got rid of his opponent, Tyr called for him. Looking back, almost 10 cultists were very dead. Broken necks, bashed skulls, crushed ribs. Tyr seemed to be one hell of an opponent. "How will we escape?" Glemmet asked. "Through a tunnel system under this fort," Tyr replied, looking around, "but first we need distractions." Tyr ran far from the pit and arrived at the chamber where the fighters' slaves were kept in cages. He crushed the lock of each cage barehanded and opened each cage. "Get out!" he called. Scared, the other fighter slaves were at a loss of what to do. It seemed like they were being invited to their death, but the man, who was supposedly someone like them, seemed way too superior in power. "Get out!" Tyr shouted and caused the people in cages to shiver like skeevers and run out of their cages. "You're saving them, I'm sure they will thank you." "I'm not saving them." As Glemmet was about to thank Tyr on their behalf, Tyr cut his words. "Listen, I am a blade agent and I am alone here. My partner is dead, so I need someone else to help me carry my mission, else the Empire is doomed. Glemmet, the fate of the Empire rests on each step we take, and now, these people are our pawns. They are escaping this way, and we are taking the other," Tyr said, pointing at the other direction. Glemmet froze for a second, thinking of what just happened, but Tyr shook him. "Listen, you may as well go after them, but if you come with me, you can make sure their sacrifice won't go to waste when we deliver the report to the Emperor." It was hard for Tyr to say what he said or to trust a stranger, as much as it was hard for Glemmet to believe in Tyr, but there was a good point in what Tyr said. As a spy, he is manipulative, but he has to complete his mission, and he only chose to ally with Glemmet because he was strong enough to back him up. Yet that awoke something in Glemmet. "What's in it for me?" he said. "What?" Tyr was taken aback by the question. "Why would I help you?" "Because of the Empire needs." "Oh please. For all I care, you are someone pretending to be a blade, and even if you are one, following you around is more dangerous once we get out of here," Glemmet said. "Fair point." Tyr looked to the side and thought, "Well, I know that you have been here for some time, and you surely want revenge against the one who captured you? Maybe harmed someone you love?" Tyr suggested. Glemmet wasn't falling for immaterial benefit. "Fine, I promise you rewards once we get to a safe zone. But if something happens to me, I want you to go for Skyrim and look for Knight Captain Jonrad or Imperial Legate Cassia. Tell them what happened and they will reward you. Deal?" "Fine. Deal." And thus the alliance of a hunted blade agent and a nameless vagrant was formed behind the enemy lines. The two didn't wait any longer and followed a secret path under the fort leading out of the prison. During the riot that the fighter slaves started, the two tried to keep a low profile and slip through the chaos. But while the two were taking the route out of the fort, a figure came from behind them. "Hy!" A large rock was tossed at the two, but they ran to the side immediately. Once they got a hold of what went down, they saw the Draymora Lord Reeve coming after them with a bunch of cultists. "I assume that's Reeve." Tyr stood forward. "These mortals must not be allowed to reveal Lord Nerafin's plans. Destroy them." Reeve pointed his swords at Tyr and Glemmet. The two were almost surrounded, but they dragged backward, allowing themselves to have a stand in a narrow spot. "We're outnumbered. Let's take some of them out before they overwhelm us." And a hairy fight started. Glemmet was but a caravan guard before this whole ordeal, so his experience wasn't that lacking yet. From this day, his power started changing. "Hiya!" With his voice, A fine aura started forming around him, giving him a slight advantage in the fight. His battle-axe broke after a few swings, so he picked a sword and started killing while retreating. Reeve tried to stop the two, but Tyr overwhelmed his opponents and joined hands with Glemmet to deliver the finishing blow to Reeve's heart. "You are stronger than I thought, mortal. But you will not be able to prevent the culling. Blood will flow, and my master will let loose darkness upon the world," Reeve said before his body falling apart and disappearing into the void. By that, there were no dangerous opponents coming after them, as far as they know, but there was no telling what the Daedra had in play for them, so they escaped north through the nearby woodland. "Stop!" Glemmet called, pointing the sword at Tyr. "Come on. What now?" Tyr seemed frustrated about Glemmet's actions. "I just want to know one thing. That Daedra said something about Lord Something's plans and the culling? What is going on here?" Glemmet asked. "I don't know much," Tyr said. "Do you think I believe you? Why are there Daedra assisting the Dominion? Who are we up against?" Glemmet asked. "I don't know." Tyr seemed frustrated too. "I don't know what a culling is, even though it sounds ominous, and I don't know what Lord Nerafin is planning. All I know is, I have to go back and report what I know. That is my duty, and frankly speaking, even though I like you, Glem, you're a good warrior and all, but you're kinda a pain in the ass at the moment." "Fine." Glemmet dropped his complaining. "So, what do we do now?" he asked. "This culling and the Daedra's involvement is not a good thing. I can go directly and report, but there is an alternative that won't waste much of our time. I have a friend, a Dunmare called Laaneth. She is Daedrologist, so she must know of that culling. Her knowledge will save us time," Tyr said. "A Dunmare Daedrologist? Fine, lead the way." And the two led out for their journey. Little did they know that this is merely the start of the end of the Great War. Important. Before you go, I've some news. Webnovel told me they can send me a contract for Dragonborn Saga. It is aid gift only you contract, which means no premium. This also means I've to stop putting chapters on Patreon. I am asking you guys because this is super important. 1. If I take the contract, it will return the same just like before the early access on. 2. If I don't, nothing will change. Chapter 486 Legends 2. Finding Laaneth. Big flipping thanks to the new patrons. At Vitten, C rank. At David Pokora, D rank. The Dremara's words unnerved the hero. They journeyed north to meet Laaneth, a sorceress friend of Tyr's well versed in Daedric matters. But the road ahead was far from clear, Kellen. Tyr and Glemmet kicked off their journey from south, passing forests and rivers, avoiding the roads that were being monitored by the Aldmeri Dominion. Ever since the start of the Great War 4 years ago, the county of Leowian was the first to fall, thus it was the one with the most established Aldmeri order. "So, that Laaneth, where do we find here?" Glemmet asked. "South to Blackwood, near the Topple Bay," Tyr replied. "So she is a rich person. All mages are rich." Indeed. The two were having such a conversation after they were stopped by a group of bandits a while ago. The bandits seemed to have killed a merchant and looted his goods, then saw a Tyr and Glemmet as easy targets to pick on. Little did they know the fate of their actions was leading to their demise. As the Glemmet and Tyr prevailed over the bandits, the last bandit begged them to spare his life in exchange for leading them to the stolen goods. Glemmet agreed to finally get to have some proper supplies and goods, but as they were about to let the bandit loose, Tyr waved his sword and killed the bandit. Glemmet was upset as he had given a word to free the man, but Tyr had a sound argument that killing the bandit would secure them a better chance to cut loose ends. If the Thalmor caught that man and he talked, things would get messy for them. Now that they got some weapons and horses to ride, the journey became smoother and the two managed to get out of the forest to the open fields, but who received them was a band of Dominion guards. A fight occurred and thankfully, The Dominion guards didn't have a mage with them, making them an easy opponent to the highly skilled Tyr and the rapidly developing Glemet. "The way I see things, you are developing your aura very well, Glem," Tyr complimented. "Thanks. The tips you gave me really help," Glemet said. The two may have started on the wrong foot and argued about a lot, but they developed a good relationship with time, so much that Tyr started instructing Glemet about the aura. Glemet's aura was unique, carrying a strange power to it. It also took a strange color resembling the violet, which seemed to have been influenced by Tyr's beast aura. "I've never asked you, you are called Glemet, odd for an Imperial to be given a Nord name," Tyr remarked. "My father is an Imperial, my mother is a Breton." "Well, they were," Glemet replied. "Oh. Well, you are not a Nord from either side." "I was raised in Bruma." "Aha. I see." Bruma is the northernmost county in Cyrodiil, making it very close to Skyrim. Not just that, by the unique landscape of Bruma being mostly on the Geralt Mountains, it gained the same atmosphere and looks of Skyrim more than Falkreath itself. Also, Bruma has a very large Nordic population. "So, you are an Imperial, a Breton and a Nord at the same time. That makes you the most human person I've ever seen," Tyr said with a loud laugh. "It sounds weird, but thanks. Shouldn't Nords like you be the proudest humans about being humans?" Glemet asked. "Maybe you're average Nord but a firemane?" "Nah. We have giant's blood." "Well, that explains," Glemet pointed out Tyr's height. "I'm the shortest in the family." "Shut up. Giant's blood, brother. Giant's blood." The road was peaceful for some time after bypassing the Dominion patrols and checkpoints until the two reached the Topple Bay. There were fishing villages scattered around that area as well as some rich people's estates that were abandoned during the war, one of which is Laaneth's house, who preferred to stay at her home despite the occupation of the Dominion. As a respectful mage who has no connection to the Imperials, the Dominion didn't bother her that much and left her without crossing paths. "We've made it. That's Laaneth's house." As the pair arrived, Tyr saw the house from a distance. He wanted to hurry and reach it, but soon he stopped. "And it's crawling with cultists. Laaneth must be in trouble. Come on." The two snuck under the cover of night and covered the ins and outs of the house, counting over a dozen cultists. These ones were similar to the cultists of Boethiah from the fort Glemet was held in. Look for any clues. The sorceress must know more than what she spoke. A senior cultist commanded his subordinates, and the house was being taken apart piece by piece. "What should we do?" Glemet asked. "They took here. We need to find out where." Tyr stood up, unsheathing his sword. From the looks of it, this number of cultists wouldn't even pose a threat to Tyr or Glemet. The two covered the house from two sides and started crippling every cultist they come across. In a matter of minutes, they got the senior cultist cornered. Tyr had the man at sword's point, intimidating him to speak everything he knows about Laaneth. "Ha! You're too late. By now the sorceress is leagues from here," the cultist screamed. Tyr was unamused by the cultist's attitude, so he tortured him by beating the life out of him. What got to the man, however, was tying him up in a barrel with a large skeever. The man howled from pain and begged them to get him out as his body was being torn apart inside the barrel by the skeever, and they got a location on Laaneth. The cultists kidnapped the sorceress Laaneth and had taken her north. They would use her to help them bring about a dreadful prophecy known as the Culling. Kellen. Bravel. The cultists seemed to have taken her towards their temple in Bravel. It seemed like a suicide going into a very secured city under the control of the Dominion with no much backup, but seeing the lengths taken by the cult to know what Laaneth knows, it seemed the wisest thing to do is to interrupt the enemy's plans at the moment. And thus Tyr and Gollum headed to a nearby smuggler's dock that should be abandoned. If they could get a small ship, they could commandeer sailing it through the Topple Ball into the Niben River. Tyr, after all, was from a family of experienced sailors. Once the two reached the docks, they found a small ship that seemed to be in good condition. It would take some time to prepare it for a long sail, but once they are in the open water, it would be easy to navigate. "We are straying too much," Glemet complained. "I don't like it any more than you do. But we need a ship to chase the cultists, and we don't have any coin. Besides, this ship belongs to smugglers, and I have it on good authority that—" Tyr was climbing the ship while checking it. "Intruders!" an Argonian sailor shouted. "That they're not here tonight." "Seriously?" Glemet was fed up with Tyr's nonsense, but the only thing that could be done was to draw swords and charge at the ship's crew. "Stop them, stop those scoundrels! Use the special blades!" the Argonian shouted. In a matter of seconds, the situation turned noisy, and all the sailors were being punched and kicked by the two warriors. "These people are tough. Careful! The poison on some of their blades looks deadly. Let's try to avoid them." Tyr pulled Glemet from harm's way. As they faced the Argonian captain together, it was a hard fight, especially against the skilled Argonian, who utilized his tail to crash Tyr at the mast, but soon Glemet managed to knock him down. Once the Argonian was on the ground, he could do nothing other than surrender. "Who sent you? You don't look like those Dominion goo," the Argonian asked, but soon he heard a voice calling. "Hey, what's going on up there?" It was someone that seemed to have been drawn to the noises over the ship. "Dominion guards. Shit, we're found," Tyr cursed. Glemet checked the situation from far, then pressed his blade against the Argonian captain's throat. "Sail the ship. But, now!" Realizing that they had a common enemy, the smuggler, who was called Swims at Night, agreed to sail north in search of the sorceress. 2 days passed in the sea and a storm hit the Topple Bay. It was hard to stabilize the ship, but Swims at Night was in a good mood. "Hurry up, boys. Hold on to anything, these few waves will be rough." "Ha!" Swims spoke in ecstasy. "Is that lizard on skooma or something?" Glemet was having a hard time on the ship. "You want some?" Swims offered skooma. "Perfect. You seem to be enjoying yourself, Swims." Tyr laughed it off. "Ah, I love a good storm. Makes the seafaring life interesting." "How about pirates?" Tyr turned around, looking at the ship on their tail. Swims and Glemet looked back with annoyed eyes. "They're right, bastards. Treat an honest smuggler like a common merchant. Sigh. There's no honor among scoundrels," Swims complained. "What use would it be?" Glemet snorted. "Of course it has a use. I stole this cargo fair and square. Let's just send these dishonorable thieves into the brine." It was indeed a very chaotic fight. Many of the crew members of both sides started falling off the ships once they crashed together side by side. Swims was busy sailing his ship while Tyr and Glemet took care of the defense. The fight was as long as the storm, and the two ended together, costing Swims at Night a few good crew members and some cargo. Promising to repay the smuggler once they rescue Laaneth, Swims at Night agreed to help looking for the sorceress, who is supposedly very rich, as all mages are. After entering the Niben River, the sailing was smooth and the ship wasn't interrupted by anyone after posing as a merchant ship coming from Black March, but as they advanced further towards Bravel, they spotted the wreckage of a ship at the bank of the river near a forest. Tyr was certain that this is the ship that was taking Laaneth. "There's no sign of Laaneth. You think the crash killed them all?" Tyr asked Swims, whose crew extracted corpses of many cultists from the wreckage. Swims sniffed the air and frowned. "Maybe. Or maybe it was the locals." The locals he mentioned were a pack of feral spriggans running towards them. These spriggans seems to have been corrupted by magic. From a fight to another, Tyr and Glemet fought off the spriggans until the walking trees were nothing other than a bunch of crisp wood. Naturally, they would suspect the feral spriggans were corrupted by the cultists, so they followed the tracks of the spriggans back to their grotto. There, they were received by a great spriggan matron. Other than Tyr, everyone else was hyped for a fight, but Tyr stopped his group and talked to the Spriggan in a tongue a few of the firemen's learned. He confirmed something from her. The Spriggan knows where Laaneth was taken, Tyr said. But? Glemmet asked. Spriggan matrons are cunning and they may have an agenda, Tyr said. Those trees. Swims didn't buy it. What do you guys think? Nag would have followed, but Mother always said this one was too curious. Nag. Curiosity served the travelers well. Whatever its reasons, the creature led them straight to their quarry. Kellen. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.